Hello Chooms, welcome to another compilation style video. There's a catch though. Today, rather than just getting my previous videos of various Night City legends stitched together, you'll also be getting the stories of 12 new legends that I haven't previously covered, all of which will come first in this video, thereby completing the lore coverage of every single Night City legend. I'll put them all up on screen and timestamp them below. Keep in mind, because of the nature of this video and the overlapping events of many of these stories, there will be repeated information. So, thank you ahead of time for understanding. Go ahead and lock into that assignment, settle into bed, or really, just do whatever you please, and enjoy these ad-free Legends of Night City. It's important that before we speak on Night City legends, that we actually define what makes you one, the core component being your reputation as an edgerunner, whether it be as a solo, fixer, techie, or netrunner. Everything about a legend traces back to their reputation, one that precedes them, and has earned the respect of others in their field through either pulling off the impossible or dying doing the impossible. You see, you don't have to be some almighty Morgan Blackhand level merc if you're capable of inspiring a crowd or a group of legends to barge into Arasaka HQ and show them who's the boss, which is the distinguishing factor between the likes of Silverhand and Blackhand. Johnny was by no means strong alone. It was entirely his ego and charisma that carried him to legend status, not to mention just a refusal to die. So this is a clear-cut case that physical prowess isn't everything in the world of edgerunning. It's only really for solos. Cunningham created a program, Bartmoss crashed the net, Murphy assassinated Kei Arasaka, David died dueling Smasher at Arasaka HQ, etc. So there's really three ways to be classified as a legend: your physical strength or talent, how you live, or how you die. Do all three, and suddenly you've got the Night City legend. Now, let's begin. The story of Night City and the source of many legends begin with the tale of a single man. A man named Richard Knight, born in Pasadena, California. He was the second eldest of 5 children. His parents were extremely talented researchers employed at Caltech in the materials science department. Knight showed a natural aptitude for engineering and was set on making it his lifelong passion. He even managed to make it all the way to college before this dream soured, thanks to a disagreement with his roommate that lost him a company the two had formed together. In the name of revenge, this had him do a 180 and declare a change to business financial investment. Using this newfound knowledge, he managed to regain his business. Now that he had a history in engineering and investment, it was time for something new. Richard, alongside his colleagues Halsey and Ferris, founded a development company specializing in producing mega projects such as office complexes, airports, and even small cities in record time. This company, HFN, was wildly successful, contributing to large-scale development around the world. Their efforts were, of course, met with an excess of wealth, and Richard even met and married his lifelong partner, Miriam. Knight wouldn't allow the success to cloud his vision from the inevitable collapse, a period of economic failure brought on largely by the United States Gang of Four, who had been exposed for interference in global stock markets and diplomatic affairs, igniting waves of violence and even martial law. To protect himself, the ones he cared about, and ultimately the surrounding economy, he founded Knight International and began to draw up plans for a utopia, an environment controlled and managed by corporations, free from the impending economic and social disasters and corrupt governments. A city so grand that all others before or after would pale in comparison. Being a corporate planned city, Knight had no struggle getting the likes of Arasaka, EBM, and Petrochem to sign on to lend his unheard of amount of capital. He then set his eyes on a small town called Morro Bay, a location with access to both ocean ports and modern highways, and most importantly, land that could be bought for pennies on the dollar. There was reason for the price though. The town had suffered from gang violence for decades, and when the collapse began, so did a turf war between the police force and local biker gangs, an event that ended with 10,000 dead, maimed, or fleeing home. In a matter of days, Morro Bay and its surroundings became a ghost town with little to no inhabitants. But the deal was just too good to pass up. So Knight hired Arasaka to clean out the gangs and to further seal it, renamed the area Del Coronado Bay, the site of the Utopia Coronado City. With the city being built beyond even its original scope, it truly reflected the vast vision of Knight, many of the architectural designs being his very own. But in doing all of this, Knight had dug himself into a hole. Despite having major bankrollers, he was forced to bring in construction partnership. Unfortunately for Knight, the West Coast mobs had a stranglehold on heavy construction, leaving him no other options but to partner with them. His adamance against criminal presence within this new city would obviously anger his partners in organized crime, and would ultimately be his and the city's undoing. During the first 4 years of construction, there were daily threats against Knight's life, with only his corporate partners to defend him. Eventually, Knight's luck ran out. On September 20th, 1998, he was shot and killed in his penthouse suite at the top of the newly constructed Parkview Tower. His killer was never apprehended, and in his memory, the newly appointed city council officially renamed Coronado City as Knight City in his honor. His wife Miriam would go to use his money to build what would become Knight Corporation, structuring it entirely around Knight's ideals and principles. The story of Knight is tragic, a review that the mix of impatience and large aspirations can get you into an inescapable situation. His haste in completing his city under the employ of both the mob and untrustworthy corporations had undone all of his efforts, leaving only Knight Corp to attempt to pick up the pieces. Though, who knows? The will of Knight could very well become dominant thanks to their AI conditioning and presence of the mysterious Mr. Blue Eyes. Rogue Armendaris, the queen of the afterlife and one of few legends to live a long life. Her birth date and place is unknown, with only her life as a teenager and beyond being recorded. Early on, she transitioned from gang life to become a solo, and was one of the most successful new mercenaries on the scene in Knight City. During this time, she even began a relationship with Johnny Silverhand that ended shortly in 2011. After finding out Johnny had cheated on her. During her time as a solo, she worked largely with Nomad Santiago as a duo, completing jobs such as Johnny's raids on Arasaka in both 2013 and 2023. She even had a brief romantic relationship with Morgan Blackhand, unknown to many during her time as a solo. After the nuke went off in the Arasaka Towers, she was present at the death of Kei Arasaka alongside Spider Murphy and Shaitan. Though her loyalty to these Knight City legends is largely called into question, seeing as she remains the only one alive and is even at the top of Knight City hierarchy, despite the fact she should be at the top of Arasaka's hit list. To wrap it all together, she even worked with Adam Smasher during the time of Red for a brief period. It was only at some point by 2045 that Rogue got so badly injured in a car crash that even cyberware couldn't fix all the internal damage, forcing her to retire from the solo lifestyle and become a fixer, holding court with local solos and acting as a middleman with potential contacts, providing them with valuable information and the intelligence they needed. Rogue even started operating the Afterlife in downtown Knight City, though she would later have to relocate the bar to Watson. By 2077, Rogue's reputation as a solo continued to inspire and influence others. As the Queen of the Afterlife, she was regarded as Knight City's top fixer. Holt Cunningham was one of the few geniuses who could not only run the net, but also create new concepts and code. Being one of the best programmers in the world, she spent plenty of eddies on neural processors and interface plugs needed to navigate the net. Alongside these net upgrades, she was well known for upgrading her body, enhancing her beauty with biosculpting, and even installing a golden cyber arm with a hidden compartment to hold her Federated Arms X-22 pistol. Naturally, talented netrunners attracted other geniuses, leading her and Raish Bartmoss to meet in the newly formed Pacifica region of the net. Her talent became well known, as her and Bartmoss ran the Pacifica net as their own. These famed skills led to the mysterious ITS Corporation recruiting her to begin development on a revolutionary human-AI transfer program. During her employment at ITS, she would meet and enter a relationship with rocker boy Johnny Silverhand. It didn't take long before Alt made a breakthrough on her research, managing to create a program capable of transferring the user's mind into the net and explore independent of their existing body. Her employer, ITS, capitalized on the breakthrough and developed it further into a weapon known as Soulkiller. Rather than transfer personalities, it imprisoned them. This development made her the most malleable person in the world, leading to her kidnapping on April 15, 2013, while leaving a concert with Silverhand, all of which was orchestrated by Toshiro Harada, who wanted Cunningham to recreate the program for the Arasaka Corporation. While captive, she rebuilt the software from memory and installed a failsafe to ensure Arasaka couldn't use it on her. Having survived her injuries, Silverhand led a riot at Arasaka Tower with his legion of fans and a small infiltration team. As Toshiro awaited the inbound Rocker Boy, he grew fearful enough to use Soulkiller on Cunningham, but before he was successful, she managed to fend off the attack, killing the Netrunner team and incapacitating Harada's bodyguard from within the mainframe. Silverhand detonated an explosive charge to burst in the room, killing Harada as he charged at Cunningham's body. But Silverhand made one grave mistake. He unknowingly disconnected the link between Cunningham and her body, leaving her digital form behind in the mainframe. This was a relatively rare occurrence because it wasn't Soulkiller that put her in that mainframe, it was just a small likelihood when she was disconnected from her body. Not long after this, Cunningham contacted Silverhand telling him she remained stuck in Arasaka Tower, but to not come after her. While it's unknown what happened with her body, Silverhand likely kept it preserved in hopes for one day bringing her back to it. During the Fourth Corporate War in 2021, Militech contacted Alt Cunningham's digital ghost for help in destroying the Soulkiller 2.0 virus. She agreed with the hopes of taking revenge on Arasaka, and even managed to convince the corpo-hating Bart Moss to help in the effort, though to say he wasn't playing both sides would be a lie. In their pursuit, Cunningham was captured by Arasaka to yet again work on a new edition of Soulkiller, while Bart Moss was traced shortly after and allegedly killed. In 2023, Militech deployed an attack on the Arasaka Towers, with Silverhand leading one of the teams with the sole purpose of rescuing Cunningham. After infiltrating the building, she was contacted by Spider Murphy, who informed her of Bart Moss's death before downloading her into the memory core. During the conversation, Cunningham gave Spider a piece of Soulkiller to use if needed. However, shortly after this rescue, the team got ambushed by Atom Smasher and a squad of Arasaka troopers, forcing Spider Murphy to scatter the icons of Cunningham into the net, with hopes of retrieving her later on. In the years following the Fourth Corporate War, we only have that of rumors, theories, and alternate timelines to rely on in relation to Alt Cunningham. The Black Dog adventure from Cyberpunk Red gives us a glimpse at a character named Angel, who bears a shocking resemblance to Cunningham and comes into possession of Johnny Silverhand's preserved body, even expressing her love to it. If we are to believe this is indeed Alt, it would follow extremely closely to the defunct Cyber Generation timeline, in which a cloned Alt Cunningham repeatedly brings Silverhand back to life upon his every death. It is also during this time that Cunningham sets up the Ghost Town, at least the digital version of her, a haven for the other victims of Soulkiller. By 2077, Cunningham was still a very powerful entity on the net, though to what extent she remains herself is unknown. V encountered her after being forced to cross a black wall by the Voodoo Boys. While doing so, they relived the memories of Silverhand and Alt before her physical death in 2013. The hope of the Voodoo Boys was that Alt would reveal herself to a familiar entity from her previous life. Alt did indeed recognize the engram of Silverhand and brought them to a safe place behind the black wall, revealing to be nothing but an image of Alt and not actually her. The rogue AI explained that the engram was transferred to the net during the 2013 raid, but due to the nature of Silverhand disconnecting Alt, her consciousness was split from the engram, leaving her body stuck in the net while her body lay dying, with a faint pulse. The engram allegedly kept the image of Alt to keep itself from going insane, as any other AI would in the net over a prolonged time, as Mikoshi didn't exist back then to protect engrams from interference. Yet this begs the question, if the true Alt had been dead since the moment she was unplugged, how would a clone version of her very real consciousness exist? Well, I believe it really was Alt, until her scattering by Spider Murphy, in which a rogue AI consumed at least a portion of Alt's being, though that is just a theory. After Silverhand revealed the nature of these goals, Cunningham did not see the situation as her problem. The two countered with access to Mikoshi, which was the tech she would need. The AI explained that if they destroyed Mikoshi, she would try to create an engram of V if they were subjected to Soul Killer, and then would transfer that back to their body. Doing so would kill V, but allow the engram to live on, the only alternative to permanent death. Andrew Whalen is a solo named as a legend by Jackie Wells, much like the upcoming Black Hand and Susan Forrest. Little is known about his childhood besides the fact that he was born in Montago Bay, Jamaica. As a mercenary, he leads the Water Leopards, one of the most terrifying Black Op units in the corporate world, a group of Jamaican mercenaries that freelanced successfully for years before joining with Angus Youngblood, a major shareholder of Petrochem, who merged the Water Leopards into the company's military forces. Being a follower of Rastafarian mysticism, Whalen uses it as a tool to terrorize his targets and enemies. Naturally, he is a ruthless and cruel man who enjoys his work and never tires of killing. While his dedication would seem to be solely toward mercenary work, he is completely loyal to Youngblood, who promises his complete command of Petrochem's forces once he has seized power. His status as legend speaks for itself, as he even survived a personal confrontation with Morgan Blackhand, the best of the best. The date and circumstances of his death are unknown, but he did have a son named Crispin, who became a great mercenary in his own regard, who we see fight alongside Rogue in 2077. A niche can be found in the columbarium dedicated to Whalen that reads, "He tried to shape reality at a lethal cost." Susan Forrest is one of the few other legends mentioned by our friend Jackie Wells in 2077. While not everything Jackie says can be taken to heart, it's no doubt she had the skills to back up the title. She's one of the most highly trained individuals within the structure of the Night City Police Department, specifically as a Max TAC agent, though she ended up being the one to request a transfer from the unit to become the State Executioner. While impressive, this was long before Max TAC restructured to have cyber psychos molded into the squadrons, so she wasn't a cyber psycho, or bugged out even by any means. She just knew how to handle herself. Though it's no surprise she's one of the toughest solos around as of the 2020s, and of course is rightfully equipped with the best of the Gibson battle gear and a Salamander fireproof jacket. She takes pride in her work and doesn't waste time on punks. Only out of a necessity to survive her encounters, she's level-headed and rational, but that shouldn't be conflated with normalcy. After all, she's a state executioner for the NorCal Free State, hunting and killing fugitives with a zeal that can only be described as religious. Her work and confirmed executions in the field have gained her a reputation and placed as the 8th best solo of the 2020s. Beyond this, not much else is known of her, and her status as of 2077 is unknown. If you want a trustworthy Ripper doc and some good chrome, you would typically go to Vix. But what you might not know is that Victor Vector is actually considered one of the few living legends of Night City, a fact that he would rather forget now that he wishes for the quiet life. Naturally, he chooses not to talk about that period of his life much with V or anyone, meaning we don't truly know much about it. What we do know is that he was once a heavyweight boxer in Watson and a member of the Night City Devils, competing in the Watson Boxing Grand Prix. Despite coming second place in the finals, he chose to leave the life behind and has come to prefer the relatively straightforward life of a back alley Ripper doc. He continues to watch boxing matches avidly, but often finds himself looping the final fight of his favorite boxer, one that always ends in defeat, no matter how much he cheers. Vic is a legend, who has only continued to fade in time within this loop. All of this only worsened in the Tower ending, in which Victor relents to mounting corporate pressure and sells out to Zetatech, which now occupies the former location of Misty's Esoterica. Kerry Urirdine achieved his initial fame as a member of Samurai, performing vocals, lead, and rhythm guitar. He went in with a vision of changing the world through music, one he shared with his best friend Johnny Silverhand. But after the band's separation, he went on to be his own person, and elevated his name out of the shadow Silverhand left behind, becoming a legend in his own regard, and even being crowned as the undisputed king of real rock. Midway through the century, Carrie married and had 2 children, but it wasn't long before the marriage was ended and his now ex-wife actively prevented her children from both seeing or idolizing their father. It was all an unexpected turn in his life, but it put him back in the position to just make rock music, which is what all his fans truly wanted. Up to and during the 2070s, Carrie maintained a successful career in being a solo artist, but it became increasingly difficult to battle the personal demons that had formed in his lifetime, an issue that became prevalent in his music as his message wavered in sincerity without a source of inspiration. After facing this creative exhaustion and a sense of loss in relation to his old friend Silverhand, Carrie even faced a near-suicide attempt, but not long after reunited with Johnny's digital ghost when V appeared in his home. This time with V allows him to lead a samurai reunion, connect with a Japanese pop group he previously grew bitter of, and even destroy his manager's yacht as a spark of rebellion formed within him. All of this helped him find his passion once again, a trajectory that's highlighted in the Tower ending, as advertisements showcase Carrie doing a world tour that even includes the Crystal Palace. Shaitan is a full-board freelance solo with a special hatred for Arasaka, who we only managed to get a short glimpse of in 2077, in large part thanks to the inaccuracies of Silverhand's memories, seeing as he definitely wasn't on the floor before the Rocker Boy was. Very little is known about his past. As of the 2020s, he's a Black Ops specialist that is chromed out in an Eclipse covert operations conversion, allowing him advantages in both stealth and combat that others may otherwise not. He'll take any job he can get away with, but it must be against Arasaka, and it must have serious collateral damage possibilities. Within a matter of years, Shaitan had grew his reputation from that of an alright solo to a great solo with a phenomenal success record. During this time, he has been known to occasionally create or even modify jobs just so that he can destroy Arasaka property. Why? No one is entirely sure, though rumors have it his very own family were victims of Sombro's personal cruelty. So, he has honed his mind and rebuilt his body for the single-handed crusade, a cause that would be laughable if not for his ability to elude capture from one of the most powerful corporations. In 2023, in the biggest stunt against Arasaka yet, he joined Silverhand's team to infiltrate the Arasaka Towers during a Militech raid. While in the Soulkiller labs, the team was ambushed by Atom Smasher and a unit of Arasaka soldiers. There wasn't much time to work with, so Shaitan put his life on the line to grapple with Smasher to provide an escape for the team. After this duel, the next he'd be seen is as a standalone biopod wielded by Atom Smasher to taunt Morgan Blackhand into a duel atop the towers. While the nuke went off mid-battle, underneath the 3 solos, Shaitan had managed to survive and return to a new body, being seen shortly after the raid with Rogue and Spider Murphy on board the Sea Viper, the destination of Kei Arasaka's assassination and seppuku at the hands of Soulkiller. Neither Shaitan or Spider Murphy have any recorded sightings after this fated day. Santiago Aldecado is a nomad legend beyond description. Born in Berlin, Germany, he grew up into a family that was always on the move as a result of his father's career in console work. To their great misfortune, while living in the US, their home coincided with the Lawyers' Purge of 1996, an event that forced them underground and ultimately into an early nomad community. By the time he was 16, his family was unrecognizable, as the half-formed clan had changed so much, a change that seemed to not faze him, despite the hardship and rejection he'd experienced from those around him as he grew up. He just lived with it all, until he left the clan to work jobs less respected by nomad culture, such as a hired soldier or bodyguard. It was during this time on the road that he met Rogue Almendarez, therefore shortly after becoming business partners with her. The two quickly became renowned for their mercenary work, bringing in all sorts of clients and jobs. So it was only a matter of time before Johnny barged in, requesting his ex-lover and Santiago for a gig against Arasaka, that Santiago pushed Rogue to accept. The assault on Arasaka itself was successful, but the rescue of Old Cunningham, not so much. To stay on the low and seclude themselves from city life in Arasaka, Santiago and Silverhand spent the next 2 years staying with the Aldecado's clan, during which Santiago began to earn a solid and widespread reputation, His fellow nomads could see what he saw and envisioned, and through his words and actions, he was able to show them what they should truly be fighting for. Over time, the Audocados began to change and model themselves after his actions and ideas. It was during this period Santiago finally met their leader, Juan Audocado. It was in the moments leading up to this old man's death that Santiago was assigned a mission: help the Audocados so they can help themselves. Soon thereafter, Santiago was elevated as the clan's new leader. It was only as a sign of respect that he now assumed the surname Audocado, his previous being unknown. His time as a nomad leader was well spent and shifted the culture formed around the nomad community, helping to form the Seven Nations, grew the Audocados clan to an unheard size, and guided his clan through a great deal of conflict, including the Fourth Corporate War. At some point, Santiago fathered a son named Trace, who would become a well-known media in Night City. As he raised him, Santiago would tell the boy stories about the old days, earning himself the nickname Old Man, just like the leader before him. He even remained their leader in the time of Red, but by 2077 was nowhere to be seen, though his presence and legacy was still strong within the hearts of every member. Saburo Arasaka was born to Sasai and Yui Arasaka in 1919, growing up in the Arasaka family estate located just outside of Tokyo. Before he had a chance to begin his career, he was enlisted as a pilot for the Imperial Japanese Navy to fight in World War II. By 1942, he had rose through the ranks and had a fierce pride toward his country and an undying loyalty to his emperor. But one day, during a routine bombing run, his squadron was engaged by a number of American fighters. In the subsequent air battle, Saburo passed through an enemy's line of fire while weaving in pursuit of his second kill for the day. While he narrowly avoided a fatal blow, several bullets had smashed through the canopy, shattering his left arm and driving splinters into his left eye and skull. Barely conscious, Saburo piloted 560 miles across the ocean, even managing to land his plane and report to his commander before passing out. Saburo's willpower that day had been something only seen in legend, but the consequences of the battle were life-changing. Upon transport back to Tokyo, he discovered he would never be able to fly again and that his left eye and arm were permanently damaged beyond use. His discharge and prompt return to his family compound felt as if it were a dream in the midst of his wavering mental strength, spending every following day brooding in his loss. On August 15, 1945, the emperor addressed the people and made note of their surrender. Directly after hearing this news, Saburo would go out into the compound's cherry tree grove with his blade and aim it directly toward his stomach. As he began to drive the edge into his flesh, he had a moment of epiphany, and with it came a vision. Right at that moment, Saburo saw the wisdom of his father's actions. Sasai had foreseen Japan's loss in the war. He originally capitalized on wartime industry, but against Saburo's impassioned urging, he had made sure that the bulk of the Arasaka fortune was covertly protected and concealed overseas assets and accounts. As family scion, Saburo saw that fortune would soon be his to control. He envisioned a Japan rising above the humiliation of losing the war and becoming an economic powerhouse. So, Saburo drew the dagger from his abdominal muscles and went on to devote his complete attention to his work. Through intense studies and effort, he would ensure that Arasaka would one day dominate the political and economic climate of the world. Once in place as the new CEO, Saburo began making the moves necessary to cement Arasaka as a mega corporation, forming the three pillars of Arasaka: banking, security, and manufacturing. In 1980, Saburo married and had his first child, a boy named Kei, to ensure his legacy would continue. By 2020, at 101 years of age, he handed the reins of the company over to Kei, but remained an influential figure in the corporation and still attended board meetings. During this time, Saburo slowly began to obsess with immortality as he continued to age beyond his control. Seemingly just as fast as Saburo had built up his empire, he had it begin to crumble around him. As the Fourth Corporate War came to a close, Arasaka had been defeated, Kei killed, and Arasaka itself booted from the US as a whole, even having one of its own members, Michiko Arasaka, secretly betray the remnants left behind. It was during the time of Red that Saburo would reconcile with his rebel son Yorinobu and take nominal control of the Arasaka Corporation once again. During this period, he would spend much of his time in med tanks designed to regenerate organic tissue. He also invested heavily in bioengineering and mind-preserving technology. This would be his answer to eternal life. The Relic project began with the director being Anders Hellman. Saburo got to know him well during this time, and even began a personal project of the relic that would house the engram of a person and be able to transfer it to a new body. In 2077, Yorinobu would steal the relic and snap in a flurry of anger upon Saburo's arrival, strangling his father to death. In those few short moments, the long life of a man renowned and feared around the world as the Emperor ended, or so it was assumed. Saburo's engram had activated shortly after his death, allowing a discussion between him and Hanako to take place, during which he was informed of V, a mercenary that might be willing to help them expose Yorinobu of his crimes. Saburo informed his daughter that they should offer V help in exchange for them helping V. He even wished to meet with V before enacting their plan. In all his greed, despite his already prolonged life, Saburo was even willing to overwrite his one and only son, Yorinobu, for another chance at survival. Born as Elizabeth Wissenfirth, Lizzie Wizzy was always destined to become a renowned artist and celebrity. Much like other rocker boy legends, it's her fearless approach to stardom that makes her who she is, all of which is shown in her award-winning albums, concert tours, film appearances, and conceptual performance art. The turning point of it all being an erotic reimagining of Snow White in 2071. Unbeknownst to the crowd, Lizzie, upon the completion of her performance, ate a synthetic apple laced with specially prepared poison that induced cardiac arrest, dropping to the floor and lying still. The LED screen showed the never-ending flat line of her electrocardiogram. For over 5 hours, the line remained still as the crowd was held in the venue. Behind the scenes, Ripper docs were hurrying to swap her biological organs for the latest generation of more technology's implants. Eventually, Lizzie was revived onto the stage in one of her craziest stunts yet, going on to perform a single that would sit at the top of the world charts for well over a year. Beyond her anarcho-terrorist performances, she wasn't a stranger to playing the rocker boy role. Being known for her views against homogenization, she at some point mounted an armed assault on a Biodyne Systems factory, during which she and a group of mercs took full control of the building and stole approximately 1,200 different implants. The stolen items were shortly given away at an improvised concert. How did she get away with it all? Well, she performed the entire heist in concert live, of course. She knew no corporate soldier nor police officer would dare harm her on live TV, so she took advantage. In the years following, the media argued that the heist had been arranged beforehand with Biodyne, and that Lizzie paid for the implants and the renovation of the factory. The theory is seemingly supported by the fact that Biodyne has never charged presses against Lizzie, though she naturally denies these claims to save face. As of 2077, her latest artistic obsession was with the medium of brain dances. Lizzie wondered about the boundary, our documentation of reality versus our active shaping of it. Due to this, fans speculated she was planning to scroll her own BD. That same year, her boyfriend, Liam Northam, plotted behind Lizzie's back to make an engram copy of her personality and started regularly meeting up with Arasaka. Assuming he was having an affair, rather than trying to sell her soul, Lizzie hired the merc V to investigate. V, of course, secures the surveillance footage and can even confront Liam before leaving the club, though it may seem Liam's intentions weren't as negative as one might initially believe, as he cites her change in personality since her full-bore conversion as reason for his attempt at creating a backup. Naturally, such a sudden shift from organic to metal could shock someone's psychological well-being, becoming much more apparent when V finds Lizzie with Liam's corpse at the Notel Motel, claiming to have accidentally killed him during a breakup. Upon further inspection, it's obvious to V what truly happened. Lizzie had slowly strangled Liam to death, breaking his spine in the process. Lizzie wouldn't be seen again until her appearance at Kurt Hansen's party at the club atop the Black Sapphire, where she had a stage performance singing Delicate Weapon. Prior to leaving the party, V had the opportunity to talk to her. Depending on the outcome of the previous questline, she either dismisses the merc or rewards them with the unique Mercury Soundcutter headgear she had used in her performance. Konichi Zaburo was born in Osaka, Japan, becoming a highly trained and skilled solo in Arasaka employ. After proving his worth, he was eventually relocated to Night City, as Kei Arasaka assigned Kenichi to be the personal bodyguard of his daughter, Michiko, when she turned 4. His loyalty to Michiko became undeniable, no longer simply being an assigned job. He could have gone anywhere, done anything. Even Morgan Blackhand knew that much of his only rival. After the Fourth Corporate War blew over and Arasaka was kicked out of the NUSA, Konichi could no longer sport any Arasaka branding. However, he remained loyal to Michiko and stayed on as her personal bodyguard, but struggled to stay within Night City. As time went on, he slowly became less and less visible to the public eye. By the year of 2077, Kenichi is no longer seen at Michiko's side, even during the Arasaka board meetings, though for what reason is unknown. V, an alias for Valerie or Vincent, is a legend largely based around your decisions as a player, though no matter the life path, whether it be Nomad, Street Kid, or Corpo, or any other decisions, there is no doubt that V is a Night City legend. After successfully stealing the relic, living with the ghost of Johnny Silverhand, doing jobs all around Night City and the Badlands, and ultimately even defeating the likes of Oda and Adam Smasher, how could anyone argue otherwise? V's legend will surely be told by their peers and those alike for decades to come. The Militech recruiter had sat down for a drink. It wasn't common he ended up in a place like this, but that's what the day entailed. Just a stop along the way. The bar wasn't anything special, just as worn down and filled with gonks as any other. Yet, he was still able to pick up on a shift of atmosphere just across from his seating. His gaze locked onto a common sight, a stereotypical booster gang and their leader, a couple of chromed up lunatics that edge cyberpsychosis on a daily basis. While they might have been more common in the combat zone of New York, it didn't make them any more rare. The target of their violence wasn't a surprise either. A grizzly man, let's say 40s, salt and peppered hair, and a coat that popped close to his face. The only visible chrome of his being an anodized black chrome arm that peeked out from underneath. Curious enough, it seemed to be government issued. It was typical that gang members would make him out to be an easy target, and from the perspective of the Militech recruiter, he expected the worst outcome. It was clear the local leader took a strong disliking to the man. It wasn't long before he lunged with bloodlust. The man reacted, but wasn't out of fear or surprise. It was fluid, like watching a calm river during a stroll in nature. Not that there was any around here. His body shifted just enough to dodge the attack and launch his black cyber arm crashing into the jaw of the leader. Before the gonk could even stumble back, he was dispatched with such finesse that even the recruiter was in shock. The encounter was short, as he made quick work of the few that tried their luck. Those left that weren't beaten and bruised scurried away from their now dead boss and collapsed chooms. The victor couldn't even be bothered. He just went back to his drink. The recruiter looked at him like a get Eddie's quick scheme. He went up to the man and dropped him his business card, making him an offer he absolutely couldn't refuse. And the man, Morgan Blackhand, of course accepted. So, just who is the mysterious figure, Morgan Blackhand, employed by Militech International Armaments? Well, he's a solo by accident, defined by his pragmatism and characteristic black cyberarm. Able to survive as a result of his street smarts and self-interest, his reputation as a top solo is thanks to both his cunning and his ability to capture targets alive, rather than simply killing them. While many mercenaries in the dark future would define a legend through several factors, such as excessive chrome, firepower, kill count, or even influence, Blackhand happens to redefine everything one might consider. To begin with, Morgan Blackhand is a minimalist when it comes to cyberware and even his arsenal, choosing to opt for a reliable and classic constitutional arms Liberty model over any souped-up smart gun. He's as old school as they come, and chooses to live by the assumption that technology can and will fail you at some point, an ideology that draws a lot of attention from the sadistic Volborg Atom Smasher, creating a one-sided rivalry in which Smasher wants nothing more than to prove in battle that metal is indeed superior to flesh. A rivalry that Blackhand proves to have no interest in. Not out of fear, he just doesn't care. So what is the story behind the world's most famous and legendary mercenary? Where did he come from, and how did his reputation as the Solo's Solo form? Just where is he in the year of 2077, and will he appear in Phantom Liberty? This is the story behind the world's most famous mercenary and Night City legend. This is the unraveling of the truth behind Morgan Blackhand. Not much is known of Morgan's childhood and early life, just that his hometown was Brooklyn, New York. Even from a young age, it was obvious Morgan had talent, showing unique skills in awareness, intelligence, leadership, and physical prowess. All factors that push him toward a career in the US military. In the 1980s, as an 18-year-old man and a rookie soldier, Morgan was enlisted to be part of an experimental cyber soldier unit. In the middle of the mission, the unit commander had suddenly went full cyber psycho. In hindsight, many would claim that the outcome was obvious, but the cause and effects of cyber psychosis at this time were relatively undiagnosed, untested, and untreated. In this dire circumstance, with little to no time to react, he was able to apprehend his commander and take lead of the unit, therefore saving his squad and placing his outstanding talent and leadership in the spotlight. He would continue to serve in the military, becoming a highly trained killer and even specializing in demolitions. He would, however, find himself struggling against enemies he had made while in the military, those who looked down on him in crazed obsession and humiliation, such as his previous unit commander. This would go on until 2009, when he was discharged from the military after serving in the Second Central American War. Not having anywhere else to go, he returned home to the ruins of Brooklyn, a sight unbefitting of a welcome home to the combat veteran. Alongside the depressing environment he once called home, Morgan Blackhand felt he had lost his purpose in life. His lethal combat skills and training in military demolition weren't very convincing for a desk job resume. If anything, it made employers fear the idea of hiring him, thereby blocking Morgan from a viable source of income to provide for himself. This went on for months at a time, as he struggled to make ends meet. However, at some point Morgan's skills would be required in the dangerous streets of the ruined city. It was an unexpected series of events that found Morgan protecting a next-door neighbor from an abusive and violent ex-husband. With the incident escalating, Morgan ended it with killing the homicidal maniac. Whether Morgan liked it or not, this earned him a local reputation as protector of the weak, which is likely what brought him to the attention of a notorious booster gang leader. One fateful day, Morgan Blackhand would be enjoying a drink in between his constant struggle, a prevalent lifestyle all over the world. The booster gang leader approached Morgan, not hiding the fact that he had taken a massive disliking to him. The encounter quickly escalated, and Blackhand promptly dispatched him and his gang with such finesse that he managed to impress a nearby Militech leader. The recruiter would approach Blackhand after he had settled down to finish his drink, dropping his card off with him, and making an offer he couldn't refuse. In Morgan's pragmatic mind, working as a corporate solo wasn't much different than being in the service. The guys upstairs told you where to go and who to protect or shoot. Subsequently, Morgan became a mercenary who took care of problems for the Militech Corporation. By 2013, Blackhand was known throughout the Brotherhood of Solos as a professional equal to the best Europe could offer. It was during this time that he adopted the black turtleneck, suit, trench coat, and close cropped hair that became his trademarks. Morgan earned his street cred by teaching many professionals all the tricks he knew, and by resolving high-profile incidents. One such incident being the attempted kidnapping of Kara Uridine in 2019, a former member of Johnny Silverhand's Samurai music band. He had utilized his strategic sense and stealth to non-lethally capture all 5 of the kidnappers, turning them over to federal authorities immediately after. It was clear that his age hadn't slowed him down. Anyone could have killed them, but only someone as skilled as Blackhand could eliminate a threat and embarrass the group's sponsors at the same time. Morgan would go on to be rated as the #1 solo professional in the business by the Solo of Fortune annual 2020 awards in the United States. Not even this agency was able to properly quantify Morgan's abilities despite being capable of doing so for other solos. At this point, Morgan had even written the Enforcer's Handbook, with over 1 million copies audited by 2020. It was no secret that the entire solo profession had been improved by Morgan's unique teachings. In time, Blackhand graduated from bodyguard and extraction work to tactical operations and strategic threat management. It was in January 2022 that rumors began to mount that Morgan Blackhand had signed with Militech for the Fourth Corporate War, which is exactly what had happened. Militech had coaxed him into the fray, at a cost that exceeds even 3 covert op teams. During this time, the war was still between the Oceanic Corps, OTEC, and Sino, though the world-renowned professional was made acting director of OTEC Security Operations, a promotion that Arasaka felt threatened by. In response, they would execute raids aimed at thwarting operations he was personally overseeing. Of course, they denied this, but an objective of theirs was to specifically see the removal or termination of Blackhand from the war. His outstanding performance up to that point had resulted in the failure of several ambitious Arasaka operations, so they had opened a bid for his contract. But ultimately, the restitution didn't convince him to part with Militech. Arasaka weren't the only ones overseeing the actions of Blackhand. Militech had placed an elite agent and solo, Anastasia Lucchesi, under the direction of the freelancer, working closely with him to absorb his techniques and tactics. He had even been given another mission: to remove Blackhand if he threatens the campaign in any way. He recognized the delicate nature of this assignment, not to mention the danger, and aimed to seduce Blackhand during her time with him. For this Oceanic War, Morgan Blackhand would head a covert operations team, got enough funding out of Militech to subcontract a group of highly skilled and motivated freelancers, making them answerable to only him. Blackhand would delegate to mission-compatible pairs. These mini-teams each complete their part of the mission individually, while Morgan worked independently, joining mini-teams where he's needed most. These operations would go on until there's a massive shift in the war. On February 22nd, both OTEC and Sino canceled their security contracts. By the 27th, a peace accord between the 2 ocean-based corps had been signed. Despite this, Arasaka tested the newly completed Soulkiller 2.5 by planting it in the vehicular SmartLink processor of a Militech executive. The program worked perfectly. An interrogation of his captured mine led to an assault on Militech's Night City office. In retaliation, the Shadow War would begin in a 3-month period of covert strikes between the 2 megacorps. On March 31st, Militech asked Raish Bartmoss for help against Arasaka. Bartmoss was adamant at first, and against working for a corporation no matter how tenuous the connection, but Blackhand prevented him from attacking Militech in reprisal. The corporation took a different approach and contacted Alt Cunningham. He was willing to help destroy Soulkiller, though she convinced Bartmoss to join her in the effort. This contract would prove to pay off. In less than 1 month, Raish Bartmoss managed to discover the location of Soulkiller 2.5's master program. Elated, he also goes on a net crime spree against Arasaka and several other non-involved corporations. In response to this, Arasaka put out a web of operatives assigned solely to locate Raish Bartmoss, which happened to trace his line during the course of one of his sprees. While Morgan Blackhand desperately attempted to save Bartmoss, an asset and friend, the Militech forces moved to protect him would fail. Not entirely of their own fault. Arasaka had sent a massive strike team to take Raish out in style. Not only that, but ended up going with the extreme backup plan in response to Morgan's team. On May 26 of 2022, they had launched a 2-meter projectile plummeting down to Barmas's building. Barmas wouldn't take kindly to this assassination, and in response had a contingency plan activated. In the middle of the Fourth Corporate War, the net was suddenly being corrupted, seemingly at random. It would mark the beginning of the data crash. By the end of May 2022, the Shadow War had gone hot. Arasaka and Militech forces were now engaged in all-out warfare, aiming to actively destroy one another, without any regard to the innocents, cities, and overall world surrounding the conflicts. It had gone to such a severe point that world governments would begin taking action in retaliation to the two corporations that had aimed to cripple each other as much as possible. In the fall of 2022, the governments of Southern California and Republic of Texas both nationalized all Arasaka and Militech facilities within their borders. The EEC, Japan, and a handful of other countries would follow suit. With Arasaka's local assets under control of the Japanese government and Militech commissioned to work with the USA, all that was left was a conflict in Night City. Since the majority of Arasaka's US forces relocated to Night City, they had succeeded in pushing Militech out. Militech in return deemed the city a lost cause, and instead turned toward devising a plan to completely destroy Arasaka and clear them from Night City and the US. At this time, Militech had learned of a secret database Arasaka was compiling underneath their Night City HQ, one that was completely resistant to the effects of the data crash, and held enough information to keep Arasaka above all other corporations who were currently experiencing massive loss of info and networks, a database that hadn't been extracted to any other portion of the world, and was therefore trapped within the HQ. With an assault on this tower, Militech and the USA both destroy the database and rid the country of Arasaka. On August 20th, 2023, Militech and USA forces gathered a team consisting of their best operatives and hired freelancers. Thus, would include the likes of Morgan Blackhand, leading the mission and selecting its members, Johnny Silverhand, Spider Murphy, Rogue, and many more. This mission would be composed of 3 primary teams. Johnny Silverhand's Team Alpha would be tasked with infiltrating the Soulkiller labs, destroying every trace of the program, and rescuing all Cunningham from the network. Strike Team Beta would be responsible for planning a nuclear charge down in the database. This would be in the event that the data couldn't be copied or destroyed otherwise, leaving Arasaka to comb the old net for years or even decades to recover the archive. General Eddington claimed that the database was deep underground, in a bunker built to withstand even a nuclear strike, informing the crew that there would be no radiation risk and the device would be deep enough to prevent any damage to the tower or surrounding city. Blackhand's Strike Team Omega, alongside Militech's elite combat Borg units, would act as reinforcements in the scenario that either team failed at their objectives. All 3 squadrons had managed to infiltrate the Arasaka towers successfully. Things were going surprisingly smooth for such a high-value target. Silverhand's team had already reached the Soulkiller labs by the time security was beginning to lock on at their position, purging all traces of Soulkiller and downloading alt. Despite security being late to respond, they would find themselves in an unfortunate encounter with not only Arasaka troopers, but also the solo Atom Smasher. On the lower floors of the Arasaka towers, it was becoming increasingly clear that it would be impossible to extract or even reach the database. Strike Team Beta was forced into going nuclear to assure that their objective was completed. With the help of Strike Team Omega and Blackhand, the nuclear devices were successfully rigged to explode once the charges had reached the bunker. It's time for Morgan's squad to head for the Arasaka Tower's rooftops for extraction. They would then reconvene with Strike Team Alpha, that was now missing Rocker Boy Silverhand and full Borg solo Shaitan. What Blackhand hadn't expected was that Atom Smasher, in a Dai-Oni battlesuit, had tracked Alpha Team to the rooftops. For years, Smasher had developed a one-sided rivalry with Blackhand, seeing the classic solo as a threat to his metal is better than flesh mentality. Smasher had repeatedly tried to challenge him to a face-off over the past decade, but Blackhand only ever ignored him. Now that the two were contracted with the corporate rivals Arasaka and Militech, Blackhand was forced in a confrontation with the Borg. This was in part thanks to the biopod clutched in Smasher's waving hand. Blackhand immediately ordered everyone to evacuate in the AV, leaving him behind in a duel against Smasher. Despite the deadly nature of this fight, he was only aiming to scoop up what was left of Shaitan and make a break for it, so he wouldn't be caught in any collateral damage from the nuclear charges. In the middle of his running gunfight, the nuclear devices began to activate prematurely underneath the two dueling solos. As the building shook and started crumbling from the ground up, Adam and Morgan launched themselves at each other in a last desperate attempt to kill their nemesis. As the two plummeted in the wreckage below, the outcome of the duel was lost within it all. While Adam Smasher would end up recovered by Arasaka, further enhanced by cybernetics and in a state of disfigurement he would come to be known for, and the Fourth Corporate War coming to a close, Blackhand's status would remain a mystery. The years following the AHQ incident would be completely void of any confirmations on the legendary Solo, though rumors had begun to surface that Blackhand returned to President Kress to report the failure of the mission and his continuing work as a secret government asset. While it was entirely in the realm of rumor, Kress used this to gain leverage over Militech, bringing it to heel and nationalizing its assets as part of the government's new military force. Between the years of 2035 and 2045, rumors persisted that Morgan Blackhand had been spotted in several first-wave cities. These were places that needed little reconstruction and resources to rebuild after the Fourth Corporate War. It remained a possibility that Blackhand had used the nuclear detonation as a form of retirement, choosing to remain hidden and travel wherever he'd like. By 2077, Night City Legend status remains unconfirmed. So much so that the Afterlife still hasn't even named a drink after him, and yet again, the few mentions made of Blackhand have no information on his whereabouts. The only source left with any possible connection is a news article detailing Lazarus agents being killed in a Japantown massacre, in which the sole survivor claims the attacker was a portly man with a black cyberarm. While the initial release of 2077 might lead you to believe that this attacker was Morgan Blackhand in the flesh, I find it ever more likely that this was Kurt Hansen, the leader of Dogtown's militia and ex-NUSA colonel. Blackhand was known for his pragmatic mindset, non-lethal approach to combat. Likelihood is, he wouldn't leave a mess of bodies laying in Japantown. This attack would be much more akin to the illegal dealings of Hansen. This doesn't mean that Hansen hasn't in some form learned and perhaps taken inspiration from the legendary Solo. After all, who hasn't? Even V is proclaimed as the new Merc legend, replacing Morgan Blackhand in the Path of Glory ending. Besides what we see in-game, Cyberpunk creator Mike Pondsmith has actually made some statements about Blackhand on his official Reddit account, confirming that he is alive, that his story since the year of 2023 is in the writing stages, even revealing that Blackhand looks like George Clooney from The Americans and is thinner than he's been in a long time, a consequence of not having fancy dinners on a corporate expense account, meaning that we can immediately scrap the idea that he is the portly man and that he had returned to President Kress after the AHQ incident. It was May 26, 2022. The sun was beginning to dim out in the skyline of Night City. Not that you could see it in the thick, polluted air, nor did it make a difference for those not entirely hooked into reality. Netrunners never considered entertaining the physical realm. They chose the freedom of the vast, unexplored, high-speed, and limitless cyberspace and net architectures within. If you wanted to see a sunset, you could see it anytime here, a simulation better than the real thing, even amplifying all of your correct senses to improve the experience. A young netrunner in her late 20s, long braided red hair, and a short stature had just jacked into the net for some programming. In the middle of his session, she was interrupted by an annoying mail alert. It blocked her vision with a fat sausage bee and a virtual voice saying, "You've got mail. Oh god, oh god, oh god, it's coming. Now, yes." The message was from her close friend and colleague netrunner, Raish Bartmoss. He knew exactly how to peeve the woman. She hated it. The message contained was simple. It read, Foxbat 1, one of the many codes Raish and her had worked out to arrange meetings and chat rooms and the like. This particular code was unfamiliar and somewhat alarming in comparison to the rest. It had never been used before because it was the code, the holy mother of God, it's all happening now code. With how Raish's mind works, he hadn't even used this code when he got flatlined and confined to the stasis of the freezer unit. In response, Spider Murphy urgently rushed to this chat room, crashing in with all her icebreakers and killer utilities loaded. Demons Flying Point, the works. What she found was somewhat unsettling. Raish was just standing there, calm as could be. "Sweetheart, I'm so glad you could make it," he said. None of his standard psychosis even made a cameo in the timbre of his voice. Unlike the average person, being calm and perfectly normal created an eerie atmosphere around Raish. It was just too outside the norm. It was like he was suddenly Mrs. Claus or something. "Have I ever told you how much I love you? Come on, they just loaded this romantic little VR at the dunes. Let's go, just the two of us." "Okay," Spider responded nervously. Just hearing him talk like that tone, those words, soul-chilling. The two went somewhere in Asia, an undisclosed location, in the middle of net nowhere. Suddenly an icon appeared, a simple matte black ball. "Every year I come here, and every year I reset this." Then he looked at Spider, right in the eyes. She thought she could see a swelling of tears. "But I'm through, Arabella." A wry smile. "My cookie is goosed, I suppose I'd say. I didn't want to do this alone. Someone has to see it. I want you to be here." He paused, took a breath. "Well, here it goes." He looked at the ball. He waved his hand. A ping, and it changed to a globe. He shook his head. A whistle, and it's changed to a switch. And it squeaked into a big red button. No, that's not it either. Then there followed this flurry of noises and icons flashing by, an almost cartoon stream of images. A car, a bomb, a kid, a wallaby, a cream pie. It all went on, accompanied by a cacophony of grunts, pops, barks, you name it. This went on for 30 seconds. "Oh, frag it all," he said finally. Covering his eyes, he thrust his forefinger at the shifting icon. As it hit, the icon froze. His finger ended up sticking in the nostril of a clown's head. As it pushed in, there was a squawk. He turned and smiled, half relief, half psychosis. He pulled his finger from the happy clown's nose and whimpered. This was at least moderately familiar turf when it comes to Raish. "What have you done?" Spider inquired. Her deck began to crash as he answered, jamming the IG transform signal and trashing her tracer routine. "What have I done? Just wait, Spidey," he said with a demonic smile. "Wait, and you'll see. You'll see, you'll see, you'll see, you'll see, you'll see." The communication ended, and with it, the net as everyone knew it. In the year of 2077, the use of computer technology has become truly universal. Regular Janes and Joes know how to use these systems to access information, communicate, and even fight. But there are others who can use the same tech to work wonders. Netrunners. A netrunner knows the ins and outs of computer systems, the programming languages, and even write or mod a killer virus. Deck in hand, they're just as dangerous as a corporate soldier armed to the teeth. While netrunners were once considered the rulers of cyberspace, using their skulljacks to roam a vast global net in special suits to cool themselves, the landscape has changed to something unrecognizable. The era ended with a cataclysm programmed by the greatest netrunner of all, Raish Bartmoss. His close friend, Spider Murphy, of course, saw this firsthand. There were 3 netrunners considered to be the legends of the early 2000s net: Raish Bartmoss, Spider Murphy, and Alt Cunningham. While there were a few others, these would be the 3 that are brought up the most often, and easily had the largest effect on the 2000s. All 3 happened to be a close-knit group that shared their love for the net. While a lot can be learned about Rache Bartmoss and Alt Cunningham from 2077 alone, Spider Murphy isn't entirely the same. She wasn't the mastermind behind the data crash or Soul Killer, so naturally, she isn't brought up in conversation nearly as much, only appearing in the 2023 flashback and having a few encrypted entries in the spellbook Shard. So, just who is Spider Murphy? Where did she come from? And what did she do to rank amongst the likes of Rache Bartmoss and Alt Cunningham? Today, we will be unraveling the story and truth behind one of Night City's most talented netrunners. This is the legend of Spider Murphy. Spider Murphy was born to the name Arabella in the year of 1995. By the age of 9, she was already beginning to netrun with her first cyberdeck, a Hitachi Radio Shack 95. While this piece of hardware was nowhere up to standard, even for its time, it was enough to jump into the fray, so much so that she used it to hack into a Zeta Tech sales office and falsified an order to have them send her a new Caroline 5750A cyberdeck, providing her everything she needed: speed, power, and memory. She was falling in love. At the age of 13, Spider was already comfortable and experienced with high levels of netrunning. One day, as her drunken father spoke to his bottle, he spilled some information from his work as a corporate puppet, specifically about the infamous netrunner Rache Bartmoss, who Spider had previously heard of on the street. Her father had killed his state identification number, a form of ID that encoded a person's criminal and tax history, as well as their DNA pattern, all of which is duplicated in state government mainframes. If your SIN is deleted, you can't legally get a job, you can't vote, and your rights are pretty much hash. In hindsight, something like this wouldn't truly affect a mastermind like Bartmoss, but Spider wanted to track him down to warn him. When she managed to finally locate Bartmoss, she was surprised to set her eyes on an acne-ridden 17-year-old who looked a lot more like 25. Even furthering the surprise, he'd been running the net for 13 years, starting when Spider had barely even entered the world. He had a full set of high-quality trodes and a library of software the likes of which Spider had never seen. It was immediately clear that Bartmoss's skills were on a different order of magnitude, akin to even an uncanny sixth sense. From that moment on, Spider would learn under the teachings of Bartmoss everything the net had to offer. Through this process, they would become extremely close friends. During the 2010s, Spider Murphy, Rache Bartmoss, along with a couple of their netrunner friends named Dog and Edger, would practically run the net for not only fun, but for the freedom of it as well. Especially since Spider and Bartmoss were practically untouchable when it came to netrunning. The group would lynch Netwatch hacks just because they could, and because it was the right thing to do, refusing to take any payment for the skills they possessed and the destruction that would ensue. It wasn't about taking over corporate architecture, but purely destroying them for the sheer hysteria of doing what everyone else thought wasn't possible. Spider was much more skilled than the other top-level corporate or mercenary netrunners. She used a completely custom cyberdeck that was faster and more secure than decks by those same runners. She tended to use utilitarian and non-lethal software, in contrast to Bartmoss, who liked to use flamboyant and deadly programs. A quirk of Spider was her fondness of quoting famous and well-known philosophers and public figures, a personality that would be encapsulated by her net icon, a realistic rendition of a well-endowed redhead anime girl wearing tight clothing. It was all these factors, her skills, non-lethal approach, philosophy, and stories that formed a reputation that would be shared with the same reverence as other legends. The chemistry that Spider had formed with Bartmoss would undergo some pretty massive changes in the year of 2020. She received a notification from Bartmoss, opening up to one of the many predetermined codes for arranged chat meetings between the two, stating, "Thought you might be interested." This was supposed to be a relatively unassuming message by its context, but Spider would instead be informed of Bartmoss's physical death. His heart had stopped from an unknown cause, but his life support machines, sensing that his heart had stopped, cooled him down to prevent decay. Thanks to him being connected to the net at the time, he was able to continue living within it. During this time, Spider would help Bartmoss compile his Guide of the Net and Brainware Blowout books, both of which becoming a sort of biography as well as complete comprehensive guide for net running, including information on net architectures, corporations, software, and even hardware. Bartmoss even decided to release the Succubus 3 program and made it look like Spider Murphy's net icon as a sort of prank, and she couldn't retaliate against him any longer. After releasing these books and spreading them discreetly across the net to avoid corporations of infecting them with malicious viruses or getting their hands on valuable information, Militech would request the help of Rache Bartmoss to locate Soulkiller 2.0. While Bartmoss was initially inclined to reject this contract and attack Militech in reprisal, Alt Cunningham managed to convince both Bartmoss and Murphy to hunt for Soulkiller. All three were close friends and took each other's words seriously, so the two agreed to aid Alt and Militech. The search would end up being extremely quick, as within a month, the location of Soulkiller was discovered. During a programming session in 2022, sometime after the fact, Spider Murphy suddenly received an alert from Bartmoss, categorized as Foxbat 1 code, the highest of the predetermined codes between the two, one that had never been used before. She was invited to a chat room that she would hurry to with anxiety surging through her. She was welcomed by an uncharacteristically calm Bartmoss, a Bartmoss void of psychosis. He confessed his love for her and invited her on a date, where he released the rabbits to the net and caused the data crash right before his death, a detail Spider wouldn't find out until after her cyberdeck had already crashed. While saddened by Bartmoss's death, he was happy with the data crash, believing it would end Corpo rule. She would realize soon enough that she was wrong. On July 5th, 2023, she would create an entry in her cyberdeck about everything that had gone wrong. Localization and strict city nets had destroyed the freedom of netrunners. Every corp, government, and even gang now had their own net that they rule with an iron fist, with no regulation or accountability. With surveillance only worsening, the rebellion of netrunners felt futile. Pained by Bartmoss's death and wanting revenge, Murphy ended up in a Militech camp and insisted on joining Johnny Silverhand's team, who were hired to destroy the new version of the Soulkiller program being developed in the Arasaka Night City HQ, and to rescue Alt Cunningham from their network. A surprise to someone like Morgan Blackhand, who had purposely avoided using netrunners like her during the Shadow Wars, a decision made not just because of their unwillingness to work with Megacorps, but also that the combat netrunners required vastly differed to the likes of Spider Murphy. Her participation in the raid was approved, likely because of her connections to the team members, Alt Cunningham, and her familiarity with the programs involved. On August 20th, 2023, Silverhand Strike Team Beta succeeded in their infiltration of the Arasaka HQ. On their way to the labs, the group were notified by Blackhand that Arasaka security was beginning to pinpoint their location, and that they would need to move quickly. Knowing that they were discovered and about to enter combat, Spider Murphy hastily bypassed the lab doors with physical help from Shaitan, where she jacked into the console to contact Alt, and dumped her into the memory core before releasing a virus to destroy every trace of Soulkiller from the system. Before leaving, she downloaded critical info about the higher-ups of Arasaka and those who wrote the program, and received a piece of the Soulkiller from Alt to use if needed. Just when Silverhand's team was prepping for evacuation from the labs, Atom Smasher and 2 squads of Arasaka troopers cut their way in. With very little time to react, Spider would scatter Alt's icons into the net tagged by markers, with the hopes of retrieving her at some point in the future. An emergency action in the case of her data suitcase being destroyed, or worse, being killed or captured. As she exited the net and prepared to enter the fight, she could feel the weight of her flechette pistol, an unexpected comfort for the netrunner. In the middle of combat, Johnny's voice rings out, not in song, but in challenge. Johnny was challenging Atom Smasher in plain sight, a Militech SMG in one hand, the Malorian in the other. Atom turns, but hesitates. astonished at the audacity of the rocker boy, challenging him with weapons that won't even crease his cyborged armor. He raises his auto shotgun and open fires, cutting the young rocker in half. Johnny spins and falls to the ground, a surprised look on his face, the Malorian still smoking in his fist. The full Borg Shaitan took this opportunity to emerge from the wall behind Adam and begin grappling with him. Seeing an opening, Rogue and Spider react as one. Both are running and gunning, breaking down Arasaka troopers. While Rogue is accustomed to this lifestyle as a solo, Spider is clearly not, trying to drown out her thoughts by telling herself repeatedly that this reality was just a VSIM, a game she was partaking in. In the middle of his desperate escape, Spider reaches inside her jacket, pulling out a data slug Alt Cunningham downloaded to her so long ago. She whispered, "Sorry, Johnny," as she rams it home into the back of the dying rocker's skull. Then she turns, reaches out for the data suitcase, and realizes that it has too been savaged by the gunfire. Completely wrecked. 2 friends down in as many minutes. He quietly wishes Alt good luck, and parts ways with the rocker, whose head still contains the data chip she had inserted, one that would create his engram on that very spot, moments from his final breath. But at least Johnny will be avenged. Spider thinks as she and Rogue drag the wounded Thompson to the elevator. She softly touches the remaining data chips in her pocket. So will Raish. After reaching the rooftop, the team awaited AV extraction with Blackhand's crew. Just as the AV arrived, Adam Smasher did as well on the rooftop, and a new Dione conversion, waving Shaitan's biopod in his hand, taunting Blackhand for a duel. A long-lasting rivalry between the two would need to be settled now, with Shaitan's life as the bid. Blackhand jumped off the AV, ensuring its departure, before engaging Smasher with unknown results as a nuclear device activated in the lower floors of the HQ. An unexpected outcome to everyone on the AV. 22 hours after the fall of the towers, Kai Arasaka awoke with a start. He was aboard the Sea Viper, that's engines were no longer audible. They were turned off, but why? Kai had given no orders, but it couldn't be possible that they had already arrived at the rendezvous so soon. He called out to his bodyguards, with only silence in response. He slid his hand into the secret panel in the bulkhead above and withdrew his pistol. As he opened the door, Kai laid eyes on his guards, slumped in the alcove. He checked their pulses and discovered they were alive. No sign of a struggle, a smell of ozone. Some sort of taser or EMP pulse must have knocked the two out. As Kai traversed the Sea Viper, everyone was either missing or slumped over at their station, yet not a single person showed a sign of a fight. It's as if they had all simultaneously fell unconscious. He finally arrived to the forecastle, discovering the tea ceremony room was ominously lit up. Still gripping his pistol, he slid open the door. A soft amber glow illuminated a low table, on which are set a massive handgun, some kind of computer gear, and a dozen caseless rounds. On the far side is a young, somewhat pretty woman dressed in a kimono. Her face seems unaccustomed to the grim look on it. His memories flash before him, attempting to form an association. Kai raised his pistol. Spider Murphy. An unexpected pleasure. You are, however, uninvited. I invited myself. Kai scoffed in response. And I believe I have the power to enforce my will. He waved his gun to make it clear what he meant. You need bullets to use that, if I remember correctly. But I could be wrong. After all, I'm just a data thief. Her lips form a smirk. Kai stares in disbelief at the rounds on the table. Dumbfounded, he pops the magazine of his handgun open to find it empty. Mine, of course, is loaded. Your people are fine. Some will need medical attention. It's amazing what you can do with less than lethal technology these days. And a few talented friends. Kai sees 2 figures step out from behind a painted screen. One an Alpha Borg he doesn't recognize. The other, a woman whose demeanor says solo. While they do not brandish their weapons, their presence ends his plan to rush the girl. So, now what? Now, Spider says as she picks up a bottle up from beside her, you are going to share some sake with me, and then I am going to plug you into this little box, and when I do, a soul killer system will wipe your mind and place it in a prison Raish set up a long time ago. It was intended for your father, but I don't think Raish would disapprove of your occupancy. I see. And if I choose not to? You have no choice. You have lost everything your father built. Your nation has turned its back on you. You have dishonored yourself and your family. It has all turned to ash. You must make amends. Spider pours the sake with a steady hand. He passes a cup over to Kai, who takes it with a steady hand. He nods to the computer link and the cable that is coiled next to it. You would have me execute myself? I could force you. I have no wish to. It is inevitable. It is the only honorable thing for you to do. Think of it as seppuku. You are a samurai, are you not? Her words are honed blades, slicing away the shield he had built in his mind, his attempt to deny his failure, the utter totality of his clan's collapse, his part in all of it as first son, his karma. As ruthless as he is still a samurai. You are not my first choice of a Kaishakunin, but... He says. Spider nods. He nods back, and solemnly jacks in. As the soul killer rushes upon him, he speaks through the interface. The ocean waves swell, stare into Death's eyes, laughing. The seagulls cry above. Spider watches as the twitching subsides and then ceases. 5 long minutes later, she kneels by him, checking the pulse of her victim. She shakes her head and mentally sends a brief flurry of commands. The interlink on the table begins to smoke as the last soul killer system dies thousands of miles away in a fiery blast. She stands, walks out on the deck with Rogue and Shaitan beside her, and stares out into the night sky, bidding Silverhand, Blackhand, and Bartmoss farewell. She stared in silence, struggling with a feeling of emptiness inside. While the Fourth Corporate War would go on to end in Militech's favor, thanks to the efforts of Strike Team Beta and Spider Murphy, Spider would suddenly disappear. We can still piece together information to get an idea of where she has been since the assassination of Kai Arasaka. Remember that Spider had spread Alt Cunningham's icons across the net for later retrieval, so it was extremely likely that she followed up her mission with hunting down the pieces of Alt in order to string them back together and create Alt once again. Looking at the Cyberpunk Red sourcebook, this theory begins to make a lot more sense. The Black Dog story contained within details the adventure of a mercenary group transporting what is heavily hinted to be Johnny Silverhand's preserved corpse, one that had been preserved in gram and all since the 2023 raid by Samantha Stevens, a Fullborg firefighter and mega fan of the Rocker Boy. The reason for the body's transportation was to reach a friend by the name of Angel, another presumed fan of the Rocker Boy. This love seemed different though, more romantic even, as she softly exclaimed, "Hello, my love," upon opening the hidden Cairo chamber within. She even had access to an unreleased samurai song, and in her official artwork shares a shocking resemblance to Alt Cunningham. Well, you might ask, how would Alt suddenly be back in her body after being trapped in the net for so long? Well, there's 2 possibilities. One being that her body, that held a fate pulse after the 2013 rescue, was kept alive after all that time, or secondly, her personality is now contained within a cloned body of hers. This stops sounding like a crazy conspiracy when you take a second to review the facts. Biotechnica up to this point in time had for the most part perfected human cloning. Not only this, but Arasaka had got their hands on their prized clone by the name Adriana, extracting all the files to recreate a cloning facility and replicate the experiments from her head thanks to their skilled netrunners, all of which happened in the Land of the Free adventure book. Following this up, players of the Firestorm Shockwave adventure can find a cloning facility within the Night City Arasaka HQ that also contains samples labeled for Alt Cunningham. And if all of this lore information I'm tossing at you isn't convincing enough, the now retconned Cyber Generation sourcebook already featured a complete story about not only Alt Cunningham being cloned, but also Johnny Silverhand. While the counter-argument can be made that Alt Cunningham is still in the net by 2077, I would argue otherwise. It's a possibility that Spider Murphy had failed to locate every piece of Alt Cunningham's icons, meaning that one piece could have been absorbed by a rogue AI, seeing as the AI actually states that it isn't Alt Cunningham, rather, it's just using the image of her. This is obviously a lot of information to take in at once, but it's safe to say that Spider Murphy was likely with Alt Cunningham at this point in time. While also not confirmed, we can find 2 entries that allude to Spider in Cyberpunk Red, the first of which is a solo by the name Dylan Murphy, a soft-spoken, middle-aged solo who built a solid reputation on the street for a cool head and a fast 44. Rumor has it, he married a pretty redhead and settled down to raise a horde of children. The last name and red-haired wife could be a reference to him actually being married to Spider Murphy. This information isn't entirely convincing to me, but it remains a possibility. The second is an entry on a netrunner known as Recluse, a hermetic netrunner living in the heart of the Combat Zone's old Japantown district. He only speaks with clients who can shell out big-time cash, and never meets anyone in person. Recluse prefers to meet clients in the lobby of her net architecture, where she appears in the form of her icon, a tremendous brown recluse spider with an icy voice. In my opinion, Recluse could either be Spider Murphy, an impersonator, or even a student of hers. It's difficult to make a conclusive statement when we have very little information to go off of. This is of course how Cyberpunk tends to be, so that game masters have more freedom. As the legendary solo, Morgan Blackhand, prepared to board the hovering AV at the Arasaka rooftops, a hum of death began to ring out. A distinct blend of metallic clunks and hydraulic hisses that formed a symphony of technological precision, each step carrying a full Borg frame boasting the apex of cutting-edge cybernetics. "Oh, Morgan," the haunting metallic voice cut through the air. "What the?" Morgan twisted around and rolled out of the AV's open hatch, clutching a heavy assault rifle in his arms. It was Adam, but what caught Morgan off guard was his armor. One of the massive arms of the power frame Adam is wearing waves a jaunty hello, the biopod clutching it, shaking about like a child's toy. "Oh, I'm sorry. You probably don't recognize him from this angle, but this is your friend, Shaitan. Or what's left of him. I'm afraid Silverhand is in even worse shape. At least the Borg's still alive in here. I'd give him another good, 10 minutes before the pod's battery dies. But to get to him, you're going to have to get to me." Morgan turns to the AV and shouts with urgency in his voice. "Get the hell out of here, now! Chief, we ain't leaving you here, not like this. You sure as hell are. You have to make sure Spider and the others get out. Now go. I'll be along in a minute." He was right. The crew on board had too much intelligence and value to risk in a futile confrontation. The crew would just get in his way. He watched the AV lift off, then turns back around. Cocking the rifle, he intones, "Alright, Pipsqueak. Time to see if metal really is better than meat. Let's dance." Adam scoffed at such a stupid concept. What possible chance did Blackhand have? Adam wasn't only in a completely different power frame than normal, but there's no chance he could even recognize it. The Dai Oni was the pinnacle of Kei Arasaka's cyborg program. At a staggering 3.4 meters, the 1.12-ton monsterish power armor was dedicated to relentless destruction. There was no way Adam could lose, right? The two dove in a one-on-one combat, a running gunfight that saw Smasher's brute force on full display, and Blackhand's agility and precision dancing around his attacks, striking with calculated precision. Despite Smasher reveling in the chaos, Blackhand's heart wasn't entirely in it. He had been dragged into the fight with only one goal in mind: to get Adam to drop Shaitan's pod so he can scoop it up and make a break for it. He knew he couldn't afford to waste time. The arbitrary time he had allocated himself was completely shattered in moments. The building had begun to shake underneath the two dueling solos. The nuclear device had activated prematurely. Time was out. The two, from opposite roofs of the tower, launched themselves at each other in a last desperate attempt to kill their nemesis. As the two plummeted into the wreckage below, the outcome of their duel would be left uncertain. So, Just who is the towering hunk of chrome known as Atom Smasher, the lapdog of Arasaka Corporation? Well, he is a full Borg solo and rival of Morgan Blackhand, though Blackhand doesn't care much for the imposed rivalry. Smasher has very little humanity left to be seen, not that he had much to begin with. After being reduced to mush by an RPG blast, Arasaka offered him a choice: either pull the plug or become a full-body conversion cyborg. With little to no options and a lack of care for his human side, he agreed and became more machine than man. Adam had no empathy for others, including his fellow employees, but Arasaka kept him alive, so he lives to repay their act by killing any enemies of the corporation that they put in front of him. It should come as no surprise that Adam prefers the missions with the highest civilian casualties, often going out of his way to inflict unnecessary amounts of collateral damage. So, what is the story behind the world's most merciless corporate cyborg and Night City legend? Where did he come from, and how did he earn his reputation as the NC Boogeyman? This is the story behind a worthless New York City muck turned cyborg. This is the unraveling of the truth behind Atom Smasher. Atom Smasher was born sometime between the years of 1980 and 1993. While his specific age is unknown, his upbringing certainly is not, which is the only reason as to why we can estimate the period in which he was born. His upbringing found him within New York. His mother was Russian while his dad was from the South Bronx. From an early age, he was forced to fight for survival. To be weak was to wither away. This was the consequence of the harsh environment New York City found itself in. In the year of 1993, Colombian drug lords had detonated a nuclear device, destroying the World Trade Center and Rockefeller Center. As a result, the Manhattan borough became akin to a large combat zone. Immediately after the detonation, plans were made to rebuild Manhattan. However, the collapse brought these plans to an end with the eventual fall of the federal government, even resulting in Arasaka being brought in to protect the city from utter destruction. And in the middle of this collapse is where Adam found himself, the leader of a neighborhood combat gang. But what else was there but to kill? There never was much of a choice in Adam's perspective. The struggle turned him into an unempathetic psychopath. Eventually, the army had killed off the last of his members. His reaction was not what you'd expect, at least not from a normal person. He actually found himself jealous of the army's prowess and chose to sign up right away, realizing the far better weaponry the Marines had access to, not to mention the warfare he could partake in. But after only 6 years as a Marine, Adam was kicked out for insubordination and returned to New York City, where he would become a contract gunboy. It was a good life for Adam, as his lack of squeamishness and sadistic thoroughness brought in enough jobs to keep him in guns, gear, drugs, and brutal one-night stands. Extractions, assassinations, harassment, and demolition jobs came and went, and he made some good euro doing it. It was an unsuspecting corporate reverse engineering op that would mutilate his life. An unnamed but major corporation had hired Adam and a couple other pros to snatch a prototype gizmo from a competitor. During this mission, he spared no expense in his brutality, firing off even hundreds of 7.62 rounds, but all in quick succession. Multiple RPG-A warheads tracked on Adam, turning the majority of his body into a lump of meat. His teammates had somehow managed to scoop whatever they could of Adam on the way out of the gig, which was a success. For even cyberpunk standards, what followed is shocking. The docs had managed to stabilize what was left of him, primarily his brain, after he had flatlined for over 8 minutes. The corp who'd set Adam on this op in the first place gave him a proposition. They figured he just walked into some bad luck, and took interest in his resume, performance record, skill, and everything else he brought to the table. They offered a full body conversion in return for a 15-year employment contract. Seeing as Adam was mush confined to a life support tank and was getting all his senses through an interface, the options were essentially boiled down to this: have the plug pulled, or become a walking arsenal in the line of work he was already in. It was an offer he couldn't refuse, so he went on to become Arasaka Corporation's next big project. 7 years later, the new cybernetic Atom Smasher had made quite a name for himself along the eastern seaboard. He hired out for almost any mission presented to him, as long as it wasn't an obvious suicide or double cross. He did have one stipulation: collateral damage and civilian casualties are a must. This was the obvious consequence of hiring a sadistic cyborg, though it wasn't anything a major corporation or even government couldn't just sweep under the rug. During this time, he had developed a quiet rivalry with Morgan Blackhand, seeing the classic Solo as a threat to his metal is better than meat philosophy. Adam had repeatedly tried to challenge him to a face-off, but Morgan only ignored him at every possible confrontation. Naturally, this snubbing had simply stoked the cyborg's psychopathic rage higher, and it would require a massive conflict to force the two into a duel. Despite being in contract to his secret benefactors, who we know turned out to be a branch of Arasaka Security, he was allowed time for freelancing as well. In 2022, the shadow war between the rival corps, Militech and Arasaka, had turned into the front-facing Fourth Corporate War. Neither corp could spare any expense, and because of this, Atom Smasher was brought back in as a full-time Solo for the Arasaka Corporation. Adam was more than happy to fight for them, as Militech had brought on his rival, Morgan Blackhand, to head their forces. And in turn for his loyalty, Arasaka supplied him with everything he could ever want, including the Dai Oni power armor. This interlocked cyborg body was the pinnacle of Kei Arasaka's cyborg program. At a staggering 3.4 meters, the 1.12-ton monsterish power armor was dedicated to relentless destruction. To date, Kei's technicians have only produced a handful of these demons. They're a deep Arasaka secret, and with it, Adam turned into a nearly unstoppable machine. Adam wasn't truly able to put this gear to the test until the peak of the Fourth Corporate War. On August 23rd, Atom Smasher would find himself present at what would become the Night City Holocaust. Legends such as Blackhand, Silverhand, and Spider Murphy, alongside Militech Spec Ops, Borg units, and teams of Edgerunners, had infiltrated the Night City Arasaka towers with the goal of copying or destroying the Arasaka Corporation's Reliquary Database project, and erasing the Soulkiller 3.0 program from their network. In response, Atom Smasher had been sent to intercept Johnny Silverhand's Team Alpha at the Soulkiller laboratories. It was in the middle of their network infiltration that Smasher and a team of Arasaka troopers ambushed Team Alpha. Adam cut down various Spec Op troops with his arm cannon, maintaining complete control over the situation and blocking off any possible escape for the team. An unexpected voice rang out in challenge. It was Johnny Silverhand, a rocker boy that didn't have much of a place in a war zone like this. Standing in plain sight, he screamed at Adam, drawing his complete attention. Despite turning, ready to cut him down like any other annoyance, he hesitated, astonished at the audacity of the rocker boy, challenging him with weapons that wouldn't even crease his armor. So, he raised an arm. The auto shotgun on it opened fired, giving way for the APDS rounds to cut the young rocker in half. Johnny spun and fell to the ground, a surprised look on his face, the Malorian still smoking in his fists. It only takes a second. But a second is all Shaitan needs. The full Borg Black Ops specialist had previously camouflaged at the moment of the ambush, but emerged from the wall behind Adam at this opportune moment. With all his strength, he grappled with Adam, allowing the remaining members of Team Alpha, Rogue, Spider, and a crippled Thompson, to make a break for the elevator. Adam lurched around, but Shaitan's grip is that of desperation, with his right arm hanging shattered and limp at his side, blasted by a grenade. It was only a matter of seconds before Adam gets free and takes them all down. His Eclipse covert conversion was no match for a power struggle against the Dione armor. Finally, Adam managed to get the upper hand against Shaitan, hitting him and crushing his conversion. It wasn't enough to just disable or kill Shaitan though. He had an extremely special use for him. So, limb by limb, Smasher tore Shaitan apart until there was nothing left to guard his remaining biopod, the core unit of any full conversion that housed what was left of the individual. With Shaitan's biopod in hand, Smasher pursued Alpha Team to the rooftops. Upon arriving at the rooftops, Adam noticed Morgan Blackhand boarding an AV preparing for extraction. To grab his attention, he shouted his name, accompanied with a burst of auto gunfire at the AV's open hatch, getting Blackhand to roll out of it to avoid being hit. He waved Shaitan's biopod, making the proposition clear. In exchange for a chance at saving Shaitan, Adam wanted his long-awaited duel. Blackhand sent the AV on its way and turned toward Adam. He remarked about testing Smasher's philosophy for itself. Their fight would be short-lived and end abruptly when the nuclear bomb in Arasaka Tower prematurely detonated, leaving the outcome of the duel uncertain. After the bomb, Smasher survived and was retrieved by Arasaka, who healed him by replacing what little was left of the man with yet more machinery. Smasher was supposedly tasked by Saburo Arasaka to take care of Silverhand's body and his possessions, being one of the few people who knew where Johnny was buried. Shortly after, Adam disappeared for many years. However, this information is somewhat misleading. While yes, it's possible that Adam was able to dispose of Silverhand's body at some point, it wouldn't have been until at least the year of 2045. The reason this conclusion can be drawn is because of a Black Dog storyline contained in Cyberpunk Red. It details the story of Samantha Stevens, who had retrieved Silverhand's body from Ground Zero of the Arasaka HQ incident and preserved it for decades. It was only in 2045 that the body would be transported from her Night City garage to a friend by the name Angel in New Mexico. This is also when she would give one of the mercenaries, known as Zara, a Malorian that is assumed to have been Silverhand's. So, at some point after 2045, Smasher must have found more of Silverhand's possessions in Samantha Stevens' garage and around the country. So it's a possibility that during this time he tracked down his preserved body and possibly the mercenary Zara. Although he had sold much of Silverhand's items, he decided to keep some of them anyway, including Silverhand's Porsche and his signature gun, the Malorian Arms 2516. You're likely asking as to why the depiction of Silverhand's death in 2077 is different than the canon events of the tabletops. To cut a long story short, his engram and memory aren't reliable. Not only could his memories have faded over time, but his engram had suffered radiation damage and was even possibly tampered with after the fact. I do have a video covering this subject in full that I will link down below. And yes, Cyberpunk Red and the rest of the tabletops are canon to Cyberpunk 2077. Here's evidence from Mike Pondsmith himself up on screen. During the time of Red, Adam Smasher met Michiko Arasaka, his boss Kei Arasaka's daughter, when she was a sheltered 17-year-old girl. The two dated for some time after she had turned 18, something that her bodyguard, Kenichi Saburo, disdained, even threatening Smasher to mind his manners around her. Information you'll find extremely amusing when you realize that Morgan Blackhand actually considered Kenichi his Arasaka nemesis, not Smasher. If you're struggling to imagine Smasher being flirtatious in his Dione armor, don't worry, you're not alone. He actually would swap bodies during his time with Michiko, one that actually resembled a young, blonde, a bit over-muscular Elvis Presley. If only we would have seen this in 2077. During the next decades, Smasher would come and go from Night City, He even teamed up with Rogue for a time after she sold out the members of her previous team to Arasaka. And sometime after 2050, Adam was finally assigned as Yorinobu Arasaka's bodyguard and was placed in charge of carrying out Arasaka's dirtiest work, gaining a reputation for expert management of loose ends. During this time, Adam made the Ebunike docks in Watson his base of operations. Jeremiah Grayson, one of his most loyal men, became his right hand, and for a job well done, Smasher gifted him Silverhand's unique pistol. So despite having a reputation for being devoid of empathy for virtually everyone, his gifting of Johnny's Malorian to Grayson indicates that he does appear to have a level of appreciation for reliable subordinates. In 2076, Smasher was brought in by Arasaka counterintelligence agents Kate and Douglas to deal with the rampaging mercenary David Martinez, who was in possession of an experimental Arasaka cyberskeleton. When David arrived at Arasaka Tower, Smasher emerged to save Douglas's life and engage David. The two solos would have a brief exchange of insults before David would get distracted by Faraday, whom he had incapacitated moments ago, being taken away by Trauma Team. Smasher would take this opportunity to shoot David in the gut, resulting in him briefly going Cyber Psycho and activating his Sandivistan. Smasher responded by doing the same, and fired a missile that directly hit the back of David's exoskeleton with enough force to eject the latter, Lucy, and Faraday out of Arasaka Tower, the latter of whom fell to his death. David briefly managed to escape with Lucy, only for Smasher to follow, crushing Rebecca to death in the process. Falco attempted to slow Smasher down but was simply swatted away. David, on the verge of total cyber psychosis, activated his Sandivistan again, but was shocked to see Smasher utilizing one as well, with the latter scoffing that it was a rudimentary implant.
You have a Sandivistan?
A rudimentary implant.
Lucy tried to quick hack Smasher, but this had little effect other than annoying him briefly before her cyberdeck fries.
How did you?
Smasher became briefly distracted trying to kill an escaping Lucy and Falco, which David used as an opportunity to immobilize the cyborg.
None leave the slaughterhouse. Not alive.
Get distracted much?
A furious Smasher responding by ripping off the anti-grav devices from the exoskeleton, causing it to crumble under its own weight, and proceeded to beat a now crippled David. After ripping the exoskeleton apart completely, Smasher stood over a limbless David, commenting that he had some fun after all, and mentions David could have become an interesting construct. As David accepted his fate, Smasher executed him with a shot to the skull at point-blank range. By the time 2077 rolled around, Adam was still Yorinobu's bodyguard. He usually accompanied him to the Konpeki Plaza pet house, even scaring guests, such as Evelyn Parker, who was visiting Yorinobu. A number of weeks after that visit, while the Mercs V and Jackie Wells conducted a heist for the relic in the pet house, Smasher accompanied Yorinobu as his father, Saburo, arrived to talk with him. Smasher and Saburo's bodyguard, Goro Takamura, left shortly before Yorinobu snapped and strangled his father. Smasher attempted to stop the witnesses, V and Jackie, but they managed to escape before he could catch them. Upon Saburo's death, Yorinobu became CEO of Arasaka, promoting Smasher to the head of security. During the memorial parade for Saburo, Oda warned Smasher that the parade was to be sabotaged in an effort to harm Yorinobu's sister, Hanako Arasaka. Smasher brushed off these warnings, accusing Oda of disobeying Yorinobu, as Oda persisted in questioning Smasher's actions. Oda was ultimately correct. With V's help, Takamura gained access to Hanako's float in order to kidnap her. Smasher afterwards led an Arasaka strike team, personally rescuing Hanako and ordered for her kidnappers to be killed. Sometime after Smasher had become head of security, he stopped showing up to his Ebunike hideout, which was now left in the hands of Grayson. V and Rogue infiltrated the hideout, recovering Silverhand's Malorian and Porsche. Alongside this recovery, several pieces of important information would be uncovered, such as Atom Smasher's involvement with the Kang Tao raid recently reported, and a female body in one of the containers. The woman was strangled, then shot point blank with hollow point rounds 4 days previously, as deducted by Rogue. According to Relic Silverhand, this was Atom Smasher's signature style. Afterward, V got access to Smasher's personal armory on the Ebunike. While checking the audio recordings on the computer, it is uncovered that Atom Smasher was pulling the strings behind Militech backing out of a deal with Knight Corporation, as he was blackmailing Anthony Gilchrist by taking a woman by the name of Mallory hostage, who earlier in the game had been outed for secretly collaborating with the Maelstrom gang. During the ending of Cyberpunk 2077, Smasher's fate can go one of two ways: be killed at the hands of V or Silverhand, or be spared and continue to live on. But it is always a possibility that he survives no matter what. After all, Arasaka can use the Soul Killer program to create copies of Smasher's consciousness. Not only that, but his final encounter with David Martinez shows a complete awareness of the use of constructs, a program that was top secret at the time. I would also like to use this video to explain a huge misconception that gets tossed around. Many people seem to be under the false belief that Atom Smasher isn't considered a cyber psycho. This is incorrect, and is further explained by Cyberpunk creator Mike Pondsmith himself, who states, "Didn't say he wasn't. There's a concept in psychology called high functioning. Adam is a high functioning cyber psycho who happens to have a job where they want him to kill people." End quote. So, there we have it, chooms. This was the unraveling and truth behind the Night City boogeyman and legend, Atom Smasher. We know a lot about David Martinez. Hell, we have an entire anime about him. But what we don't already know is the story of his parents and his early life. The journey of his mother and father can only be compared to the likes of those old rom-coms. A big city, a man, and a woman walking down the street. The woman suddenly stops due to a contraction, a big one that knocks the wind out of her. The guy flags down the first available cab. He and the woman clumsily tumble into the back seat, and the cab speeds off for the hospital. David Martinez came into the world in somewhat similar circumstances, kind of. David's mom, an EMT named Gloria, felt her water break while she's in the back of her speeding ambulance, trying to reattach the arm of an edge runner who had gotten it shot off. Yep, this scenario is very romantic. It's actually comparable to Shakespeare if you ask me. That guy was a freak. So she sutured, and got it done, all while fighting against her own body. Finally, she told the edge runner to swap seats with her and proceeded to deliver her own baby on the gurney, all while the ambulance was still speeding towards a hospital. The edge runner alongside her cut the umbilical cord using the mantis blade in the arm Gloria had just salvaged. Brutal, yet somehow poetic. It was at that moment that Gloria and David were bonded in awareness that she would do absolutely anything for him, and he would never let her down. Life in Santo Domingo certainly wouldn't be a rose garden. The exact opposite, actually. But they had each other. Trash, filth, dwarfers, psychos, and death at every corner. Gloria did her damnedest to shelter David from all manner of danger. Thing is, David just never liked the peaceful, mundane side of life. It bored him out of his skull. Yeah, David liked to have lots going on, liked it when shit went down, because as long as he could remember, he had the feeling he was destined for something bigger. Clearly a consequence of his absurd birth. So he scoped and kept tabs on anyone and everyone in and around Mega Building H4, and any edge runner he'd not seen before, David would talk his ear off. Soon as the local Ripper Doc had new chrome, you bet David would be in his clinic, ogling it. With all that curiosity bursting out of him, there'd be times he'd get his ass kicked too. But the curiosity wouldn't die, and David never thought to curb it. This one time, the son of a 6th Street gang goon, while pissed off at David, found him, pinned him down, and started punching away. He kept punching until he finally broke his own hand, and promptly started wailing like a little bitch with everybody watching. David, covered in blood, his own and theirs, laughed all the way through the beating and for an hour after it, which pretty much meant no one in the hood would touch David ever again. And David was reassured that he was special, that he would do great things in life. He'd keep that bigger than life attitude all the way up to his death in a blaze of glory. Within the universe of Mike Pondsmith's Cyberpunk, the idea of fair and just policing systems has long been corrupted. The corporations and governments that run the world are no longer held accountable for the atrocious acts they commit and their unprovoked aggression towards innocent people. Whether it be local police forces, MaxTac, or Trauma Team, they all have their fair share of corruption and twisted priorities. The cyberspace of the net happens to be no different. The worldwide net policing organization known as NetWatch happens to be corporate funded, an entity by the corpos and for the corpos, doing its fair share of evil. Being known to use unnecessary lethal force, alienate innocent netrunners, spy on citizens around the world, and overall overstep the boundaries they are supposed to abide by. While this organization essentially acts as an extension of corporate rule, it still does what is expected of them, patrolling the net in order to prevent illegal activity and even containing dangerous rogue AI after the data crash. There is certainly a need for NetWatch to exist, but the average person would clearly be more enthusiastic if they didn't carry with them such a harmful reputation. Well, there's an extremely prominent NetWatch agent that agrees with this ideal, one that is an extremely skilled netrunner, well respected, and could even be considered a rival to the Night City legend Ra's Bartmoss. This agent goes by the name Magnificent Curtis. This man single-handedly carries NetWatch's much more positive goals on his back. A man who is often described as being fair and just, traits that become increasingly rare in the grim world of Cyberpunk 2077. So just what are his origins, and how did he come to be renowned amongst the likes of legends such as Bartmoss and Spider Murphy? This is the complete lore thus far. This is everything you need to know about Magnificent Curtis. Let's begin. The widely used IG protocol net is composed of large ambiguous sections of the net that shares the same basic default environments. These areas are called regions and happen to have constantly shifting borders depending on the influence exerted by governments and influential groups. Thanks to the IG transformation algorithms, net space is analogous to real space, almost like an alternate dimension. One of these many regions is the Pacifica region, and when I say Pacifica, it isn't in reference to the failed startup district of Night City. No. It's in reference to the ocean. Pacifica covers all of the Pacific Ocean pole to pole, meaning the majority of regions around this area are one with the Pacifica region of the net. I say majority because it doesn't include South America or Japan. This area is a stylized version of a real ocean, with glowing fish shapes and other sea life, complete with dolphin programs to patrol and clean up garbage data, even allegedly tattling on any criminal activity they see. So this region is beautiful, considered one of the all-around best regions of the net. But it might actually not be that way if it weren't for a single man, Magnificent Curtis. He was responsible for creating the Pacifica branch of NetWatch, which at the time didn't really exist. There had just been a few NetWatch runners patrolling the area from their decks on the other side of the world. What makes the creation of this branch all the more mysterious is he just showed up one day and created the Pacifica branch of NetWatch. There isn't much, if anything, to find out about his past. An unpleasant discovery for any netrunners looking to get under his skin and sabotage his control. This clearly doesn't just happen accidentally either. It's extremely likely that this erasure of identity is not only to protect himself, but others he is involved with. a procedure that accurately reflects who he is. Curtis is a netrunner hailing from Fiji, and running the whole operation out of an island as well. It's become their main base of operations, and as a result, this small island has some of the best security around. Back when Magnificent Curtis began his netrunning career, he had actually adopted the handle Rocky. Just like the majority of famed legends around the world, his reputation didn't just fall into his lap. He was known for his attitude and approach towards Netwatch runners. He wanted them to be perfect. To give them a goal to strive for, he tried to be perfect himself. It was because of this unique handling of netrunners that he was given the tag Magnificent Curtis by runners down in Australia, a tag he would embrace going forward. He is a man of fairness and just response, slow to lose his temper, but quick to respond. His mastery of the net and his profession is made ever so clear by his approach to criminals. He is hesitant to use lethal ice and will go out of his way to take his culprits alive, only using lethal force when necessary. He has a strict regard for the laws of the land and an encyclopedic knowledge of the territorial laws of the countries covered by the Pacific region, all to make sure his netrunners never break any of these, unless empowered to do so by conditional regulations while they are in pursuit of a criminal. He likewise demands that his runners never do anything to alienate the innocent runners in the net. Under his guidance, his Netwatch branch has captured a long list of both corporate and independent criminals. They ensure that their prisoners are dealt with fairly according to the laws of the land, and not summarily executed by some angry corporate runner. The Pacifica branch of Netwatch has become a respected organization, which is very rare in the world of cyberpunk, all because of the vision and drive of Magnificent Curtis. This branch is largely what it's supposed to be, a policeman of the net. In the Guide of a Net book, published by Raish Bartmoss and his close friend, Spider Murphy, you'll actually find that Bartmoss's comments in the Pacifica Netwatch portion of the text displays a sudden shift in tone. In comparison to other sections about Netwatch, his comments are both short and comparatively non-caustic. Spider Murphy points out that while Raish himself would never admit to it, the Pacifica region of Netwatch has the best record by far of anywhere else in the world. Still best to not get too mixed up from that information though. While the Pacifica region most definitely holds a place in Bartmoss's heart, and he doesn't project uncontrollable rage towards this Netwatch branch, it doesn't mean that Bartmoss and Magnificent Curtis would get along as chums. In fact, it's a lot more like the yin to Raish Bartmoss's yang. He's calm, quiet, and law-abiding, but he shares the same zeal and enthusiasm and dedication to his work as Raish. This of course means that if the two of them were ever in the same room, they'd be at each other's throats in a minute. Eventually, sometime in the 2020s, Magnificent Curtis would be made head of Netwatch. While things had seemed to be smooth sailing during his netrunning career, it would unfortunately take a massive dive not long after his promotion. In 2022, during the Fourth Corporate War, the legendary Raish Bartmoss would suddenly be assassinated by Arasaka after his time aiding Militech in their Soul Killer search, a corporate decision that would spell out the collapse of the net and upcoming decades. It started out subtly, with only a few minor changes in databases, lost files, changed lines of machine code, but soon enough, it exploded into wildfire, randomly shifting, erasing, or rewriting data and destroying or altering everything it touched. It was the data crash, a deadly computer plague that tore the heart of the worldwide information network. In short, whereas most viruses must infect a computer system, the data crash was automatically loaded into every single computer that ever ran the net. The result is that there was never any chance to stop the spread of the data crash. At first, Netwatch was able to monitor and repair the damage as it occurred. But as the chaos mounted, Netwatch's leader and top netrunner, Magnificent Curtis, realized the awful truth. Bartmoss had outgamed everyone. To stop it would have required stripping the operating system out of practically every computer and cyberdeck on Earth. Magnificent Curtis in response, launched a campaign with NetWatch against the corruption of the net. A constant struggle to save any runner, architecture, or information possible. To make the disaster even worse, the nature of the data crash also allowed AI to travel through what remained of the net unimpeded. To add on to the already lethal enemies of viruses and mutated military AI, Bartmoss left yet another surprise lurking in the bowels of the net. A self-replicating virus that strongly resembled himself, based on a twisted version of the Soul Killer program and later dubbed Rabbids. These were AI killer programs that infested the net in ever great numbers. At first, they attacked only Bartmoss targets like Arasaka and EBM. As time went on, they evolved a murderous hatred of anyone they encountered. Reproducing at high speeds, they would form a deadly pack of killer programs in the hundreds of thousands, roving the net in bloodlust. The outlook of the struggle became obvious. Unable to wipe out the data crash and overwhelmed by Rabbids, NetWatch finally gave up. On March 5th, 2023, Magnificent Curtis and the IG Overwatch Council activated IGTA Dissolution Prime, propagating a code wave that crashed the IG protocols that allowed cyberdecks and net-capable computers to reach cyberspace, essentially killing off access to the net. NetWatch would go on to spend the next 22 years acting as lifeguards for any renegade netrunners that had managed to find a backdoor into the now off-limits old net, attempting to save them before Black Ice essentially shreds them out of existence. In the 2040s, there would finally be a shift in the net landscape that would allow a return to the previous IG protocol net. While Cunningham and all the transcendent AI that followed her in the net made a discreet proposal to NetWatch. They would help humanity enter the net once more, and this was clearly the only chance to do so. This is why Magnificent Curtis made the decision to accept their help. Though with this secret partnership, Magnificent Curtis and his best team of netrunners were finally able to write software capable of tackling the Black Ice and Rabbids that infested the old net. All of it tying into a secretive project between the two parties that exists completely off record, with only fabricated documents to help cover it all up. Known only by the ominous title of the Black Wall. With the sudden appearance of the Black Wall and the rogue AI finally locked behind it, humanity was able to return to the IG protocol net, with their only protection against the old net being an AI itself. And from this point on, Magnificent Curtis is yet to be brought up in another sourcebook or even 2077, at least to my knowledge. However, there's some general assumptions to make as long as he isn't dead by the time V flips Night City on its head. He likely helped to head the deal between NetWatch and Evelyn in exchange for the relic that contained Johnny Silverhand's engram. While the nature of this deal wasn't ever fully explained, it's quite possible that NetWatch wanted this relic for a few different reasons. The first conclusion most would come to is to contact Alt Cunningham. But it seems that through the 2040s, they maintained a relationship with Alt, the Black Wall, and the AI under her wing. It almost seems completely contradictory for them to need the relic to contact her, like the Voodoo Boys. It seems much more likely that not only would they want access to the tech itself for personal projects, but also because of its implications. NetWatch is aware of other corporations tampering with the Black Wall, and forming projects to attempt to harness the power of the Black Wall and rogue AIs beyond. The idea currently is that whoever learns to control the rogue AI first will have complete control over the net, its information, and practically the world. In essence, an engram, and especially the relic's use of it, is an AI with near complete human emotions, capable of patrolling the old net unimpeded, but also thinking and feeling like a human would. NetWatch is likely investigating corps like Arasaka and Militech in an attempt to prevent all of this from happening, or, at the least, allow NetWatch to be the first to succeed in doing so. But what if I told you there's a theory that he actually is in 2077, just in the shadows where we can't see him? This entire theory takes root in the I Walk the Line quest. Mrs. Winplacide sends us to our Ranyan mission to enter the Pacifica Atrium in search of a Netwatch agent. Eventually, your path will lead you into an abandoned cinema, one that has an old western playing up on screen. You'll find a Netwatch agent by the name Bryce Mosley in the projection room. He will tell you that the Voodoo Boys are planning to double-cross V, in which V can either side with him and have the virus removed to prevent the breach of the Black Wall, or knock him out, in which case the virus will wipe out many Netwatch facilities across the continent, including what looks to be Fiji, kills Mosley, and attempts to kill V as well. What's so off-putting about Bryce Mosley is his uncanny amount of combat cyberware. He doesn't necessarily look much like a Netwatch agent or most Netrunners would. But even more so is what you can find outside the meet, near the tunnel connecting Pacifica to the rest of Night City. You can find a Netwatch body that scans with the badge. A badge that reads Bryce Mosley. So, just who is the real Bryce? The dead body, the agent we meet, or neither? It's impossible to tell, but those who spread this theory propose that Magnificent Curtis either is the agent or interfaced in the heavily cybernetic body. I would say he's obviously not the agent we meet. We already have Cyberpunk Red that has an official image of him during a corporate meeting. Well, if that's actually him, see what I'm saying here? It's impossible to know these things if our assumption is that nobody is who they say they are, or they're transmitting themselves through another body. It would definitely be interesting, but sounds pointless. Though the question still remains, who really is Bryce Mosley?
I remember what I thought on stage, that even if they all died for their ideals, it'd be worth it.
In the world of cyberpunk, rocker boys are rebellious musicians who use music to revolt against authority. They're a lot like the 80s punk rockers who look down on corporate sellouts as traitors to the craft. And because they're so charismatic, they can inspire and charm a large number of people through their musical performances. Johnny Silverhand, the lead singer of the band Samurai, is no different. After participating in the Second Central American War and witnessing the suffering corps and governments produce firsthand, he never looked back during his path to dismantle it all. But being the irrational, impulsive, and manipulative person many know him to be, there's nuance intertwined with his story, and of course, it can even be argued he is the main character of cyberpunk. But don't let that description confuse you into thinking Silverhand is the quote-unquote good guy. In cyberpunk, there really are no good guys. So, what makes Silverhand unique to the rest of Night City legends, and why is he so central to the world? Today, I will be unraveling the entirety of Johnny Silverhand's story. Some of this video will not initially line up with what you believe to be true, as the story told through Silverhand's perspective in 2077 doesn't line up side by side with the tabletop RPGs. But yes, they are confirmed canon by CD Projekt Red and the creator, Mike Pondsmith. There is reasoning behind it all, and I will explain in this video. It all makes sense soon. So, without further delay, let's begin unraveling the legend of Johnny Silverhand. Silverhand was born to the name Robert John Linder in College Station, Texas, on November 16, 1988. By the time Johnny even had self-awareness, his life was already tossing him out into the wilderness. I'll actually let an interview with Mike Pondsmith take over this portion.
Never Fade Away only gave you a narrow picture of what he was like. Is that Johnny's a very cold son of a bitch. And that was, the way I always saw him was, this is one seriously damaged person. I mean, I actually have a story around. I've been building kind of the history of Johnny Silverhand, and it starts off with the opening scene of his dad selling him at the age of 4 for basically a pack of cigarettes, and that's the good stuff, and how he ends up basically eventually ending up with, a nomad group that takes him in. And that in itself is an episode of interesting violence. So yeah, Johnny is messed up.
These nomads would provide a sense of familial bond that Johnny never had the pleasure of experiencing before. He finally had a home, and it was wherever the road took these nomads. While growing up, Silverhand's rocker roots would begin to take form as he came to idolize Wendy O. Williams, lead singer of the punk band Plasmatics, considering her the toughest rocker girl to ever be. While Silverhand was forming his idolations, massive shifts were taking place in the world, the most impactful of which to America and Silverhand's story was the previous formation of the Gang of Four, a political cabal comprised of the NSA, CIA, FBI, and DEA, formed at some unspecified time in the mid-20th century. This group managed to amass boundless political and military influence, operating in an extrajudicial manner and with no congressional oversight. So what did this group do with all of this power? Solve poverty, feed the hungry, end wars? Well, of course not. They instead engaged in espionage and stock market manipulation, kicking off wars and causing the crash of '94. During this collapse, federal bonds were being sold at such a rapid pace that the federal government had to print money to be able to buy them, rapidly devaluing the American dollar and causing massive inflation. Widespread unemployment and civil unrest soon followed, leading to prolific violence and extreme poverty. These were the harsh times that Silverhand grew up in, the consequences of the Gang of Four's actions. Though this obviously wasn't known by the average person, so Silverhand, like many others, still had a strong sense of nationalism, leading him to enlist in the military as a 15-year-old after lying about his age. It is currently unknown what happened to his previous nomad group and if it was instrumental in pushing him toward a life in the military so early. Whether it was looking for a purpose or falling out that occurred, we are yet to know. The Second Central American War of 2003, a US invasion of Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, was in full force during this time, meaning it didn't take long for him to see action. He was quickly sent to Nicaragua, a devastating conflict perpetrated by the corrupt and manipulative US government. During this war, Silverhand would experience firsthand the suffering caused by a corrupt war, during which his life was saved by a friend who died protecting him. When the government's secrets were exposed, many American soldiers dropped their banners and fought back by deserting the military. In response, the government used its influence to launch a powerful propaganda campaign against these former soldiers and convince the American public to despise them as deserters. John became one of many who decided he would no longer fight in the corrupt war that ultimately led to him losing his arm and his friend. He deserted and left for Night City, staying at the Hotel Pistis Sophia for a whole month after his arrival. The military and the war had changed his life forever. He obviously had chosen to not return to the nomads around this time. Again, while the reason is unknown, nomads are always on the move, so tracking them down might have been beyond his cares or goals. John then changed his name to Johnny Silverhand, with his new surname referencing the bionic arm he had implanted to replace his left. Johnny started his mission of rebellion and exposing corruption by starting a rock band with his friend, Kerry, originally only playing in backstreet clubs. Their first gig ever was played at the Red Dirt Bar. They would eventually be known as Samurai, though this name wasn't actually thought up by Johnny or Kerry. It was coined by Nancy Hartley, inspired by the fact that historical samurai were willing to die for their cause, even if it was immoral or just plain wrong. Nancy believed that kind of blind loyalty was stupid, and so she decided to take the name and turn it around into a street meaning, as a form of mockery. Of course, Johnny and Kerry just thought it sounded cool. One night in 2003, after playing in the Rainbow Condensa, the band was approached by a Blitzdorfer, who offered to sign them after witnessing their impressive act. This man turned out to be none other than Jack Masters, the head executive at Universal Music at the time. Samurai would be officially comprised of the co-founders, Johnny and Kerry, as well as Denny, Nancy Hartley, and Henry. Within 3 weeks, Samurai was signed, had a record in production, and was preparing to tour every major city in the world. It took only these 3 weeks for their first single, Blistering Love, to achieve #1 on the Euro charts, which soon they followed up with the album, being one of the few times a debut album achieved such status in such a short time. Johnny's music became revolutionary, kickstarting the rocker boy movement and becoming an overnight sensation. During the next years, Samurai toured around the world, playing concerts with an audience of thousands of people, even managing to sell out the whole Wembley Stadium. They released a total of 6 albums, with 3 being studio work and the other 3 being concerts and jam sessions optioned by Universal. In early 2007, the band suffered a blow that would later be decisive. Their keyboardist, Nancy, was dating a guy whom she eventually married. The rest of the band members didn't see it at first, but 10 weeks after the ceremony, they realized Nancy's husband was mistreating her. One day, she finally got the courage to talk about it with the other members after her husband tried to force her to quit Samurai. For Johnny and Carrie, that was the last straw, and the same day they decided to go to their apartment to kick his ass. But by the time they got there, it was already too late. Nancy's husband had started to beat her again. Deciding she'd had enough, threw him out the window of their 83rd story apartment. Nancy was shortly arrested, and after the trial, she was sentenced to 7 months in prison. During the time span, the band firmly supported her. By 2008, Nancy finally got out of jail, focusing on returning with the rest of Samurai. Unfortunately, those 7 months of inactivity had put a split in the band that they were not able to heal, eventually realizing they were each going on different creative directions. Soon afterward, they all went on their separate ways, marking the end of Samurai. Johnny and Carrie were still some of the most popular musicians at the time, and of course started solo careers. Johnny used this opportunity to push his anti-corporation and anti-government message. By then, CBS Music wanted to sign Johnny so desperately that they blackmailed him, threatening to reveal his true identity as a deserter of the Second Central American conflict. In defiance of the blackmail attempts, Johnny instead signed once again with Universal Music, releasing a complete album entitled Sins of Your Brothers, in which he admitted to being a deserter and revealed all the terrible actions the government had ordered its military to carry out. The album was of course a wide success, and changed public perception of what it meant to be a deserter. Johnny continued his rebellious campaign in the 2010s. During this time, he performed his famous free benefit concert in Japantown to call attention to the brutal methods the NCPD used to quell the homeless riots. Johnny's relationship with Rogue also ended at some point in 2011 after she discovered that he had cheated on her. Around this time, Silverhand found himself in a heated argument with an Arasaka exec over a parking space. After getting in his face and both sides relentlessly refusing to admit wrongdoing, Johnny got sick of it and just shot out the tires on the exec's car, which happened to be a classic 911 Porsche, and this exec actually turned out to be Toshiro Harada, who he would come to meet again later down the line. Not before returning at some point and stealing that same Porsche though. So yeah, that's how Johnny got his classic Porsche that we find in 2077. It also lends some more validity as to why Silverhand thinks Arasaka is just getting back at him in this upcoming story. After giving a concert at the Hammer on August 4th, 2013, Johnny reconnected with his former girlfriend, Alt Cunningham. When the two went for a walk that night, they were ambushed by a group of thugs hired by Arasaka. These thugs injured Johnny severely and kidnapped Alt as a helpless Johnny watched them take off in a van. Unknown to Johnny, a media reporter named Lyle Thompson had seen everything and got Johnny to medical care quick enough to save him. It was revealed that Thompson had been trailing Alt Cunningham as he knew about her creation of Soul Killer and Arasaka's desire to get their hands on it. Silverhand was pissed, and he knew what he had to do. On the 5th of August 2013, Johnny gathered a strike team consisting of his ex-girlfriend and solo, Rogue, media reporter Lyle Thompson, and the nomad leader of the Aldecados, Santiago, in order to infiltrate Arasaka Tower in Night City to save Alt Cunningham. As a diversion, he called in a favor from all the members of his old band. Samurai gathered together to perform an entirely free show directly in front of the complex. Samurai's performance led to a riot aimed at the tower as troops were called in to control the situation. Unbeknownst to Johnny at the time, Arasaka had kidnapped Alt specifically to force her to develop a new version of the Soulkiller software she had written for ITS. In a panic reaction to the assault, Toshiro Harada used Soulkiller on Alt while the assault took place, trapping her inside the Arasaka mainframe. As Johnny and his team infiltrated the tower, Alt attempted to find a way to escape the mainframe and return to her body. While making their way to the Soulkiller labs, the rush of emotions and surrounding violence had started reigniting something within Johnny, more specifically, within his silver cyberarm. Johnny was beginning to display symptoms of cyberpsychosis that reached all the way to his Malorian. Why to his Malorian though? Well, it was a one-of-a-kind creation specifically for the Rocker Boy. Equipped with a prototype Smart Link and was left-handed to be sported with his arm, packing a shot so powerful that his fleshy right arm wouldn't be able to handle it anyway. But it wasn't its firepower that created a problem, it was the Smart Link. Even just using Silverhand's Malorian can technically invoke a sense of cyberpsychosis, as the Smart Link overrides your body to create better precision while shooting, removing the sense of guilt and hesitation someone with empathy might usually feel when killing another living being. Paired with Silverhand's PTSD, personality, and troubled past, his arm would begin taking a mind of its own, being referred to as the Hand. It was Johnny's cyberpsycho expression. Internally, Johnny would treat any horrible thing he does as the Hand took over. The team managed to reach the room where Toshiro and Akira were keeping Alt. All Johnny could see was Alt's lifeless body. His mind became clouded as his cyberarm began to convulse in fury by his side, locking the Malorian in slow-slung hip rig. The metal fingers locked to the grip. This time, he had no reason to stop it. Johnny allowed the Hand to take aim, placing a red pinpoint on Toshiro's forehead. The Hand convulsed. Bang, says the gun, as Toshiro collapses to the ground. Johnny then disconnected Alt from the netrunning chair she was plugged into, assuming she had died as he gathered her still warm body in his arms. Behind the wall of monitors, a disembodied Alt screamed out to Johnny, but he could not hear her. It is unknown what Johnny did with Alt Cunningham's body, but we know that it held a faint pulse despite her disembodiment. For how long it would stay this way is also unknown. But in the Cyber Generations timeline, Johnny Silverhand puts the mindless husk into a cold sleep. While this is considered a separate timeline from canon, released before the Firestorm series, many of its details and plotlines were used for the following canon releases. After the assault on the tower, Johnny and Santiago left Night City and went into hiding with the Aldecado's nomad family. For one reason or another, Johnny had returned to his younger roots, likely finding comfort in the lifestyle. In 2015, the two finally returned from Mexico City. Little is known of what Johnny did during this time, but it was around 2015 that a firefighter by the name of Samantha Stevens saved him from a fire in one of his studios. Around 2020, Johnny gave an interview in which he reminisced about a girl he had fallen for. She had told him she was born in Miami around 2004, as she could still remember the destruction of Tampa. Johnny mentioned that she had a biosculpt smile and blue Technic 2350 eyes, though he did not care how much of her was quote-unquote real. In 2023, Johnny had begun work on a new song in one of his studios, which would eventually be credited under the name Samurai, but during this time the song would remain unreleased. The Fourth Corporate War had begun to reach its peak. Not only this, but an important revolution had been brought to his attention. The woman he loved, the woman he had lost to the hands of Arasaka, was actually alive. No, her body hadn't risen to consciousness, rather she was in the net, the disembodied engram that Silverhand had no previous awareness of. She had been aiding Militech with the help of Raish Bartmoss and Spider Murphy in the Fourth Corporate War, but unfortunately, had been captured by Arasaka once again, now trapped in their network. But the Netrunner, Spider Murphy, had clued Silverhand in on a plan Militech was forming, and without a second thought, he chose to participate, all at the chance of rescuing his lover. Ahead of this coordinated attack, Johnny and Carrie performed their last ever gig together in the Hammer, which would be the last time both Rocker Boys ever saw each other. On August 20th, 2023, Johnny and Morgan Blackhand, alongside Rogue, Shaitan, Thompson, and Spider-Murphy, led a Militech assault team on the Arasaka Towers in Night City, with the intention of destroying the towers with a mini-nuke, and ultimately ending the Fourth Corporate War. After infiltrating the rooftop and making quick work of its security systems, Strike Team Alpha, led by Silverhand, made their way to the Soulkiller Labs. Here, Spider would connect directly to the Arasaka mainframe and successfully liberate Alt. Unfortunately, this accomplishment was short-lived. A sudden explosion into the labs revealed Arasaka forces led by the Atom Smasher. Johnny's team was pinned down. Everyone dived to find cover against the onslaught of bullets, while Spider-Murphy had to make a split-second decision. She took all the icons that composed Alt Cunningham's engrammatic data and scattered them across the net, to hopefully retrieve at a later time. Johnny, who had barely managed to find cover, was conflicted on what to do next. He felt that during his first attack on the towers, he had failed Alt, and this time, he was determined to not fail her again. Making a rash but brave decision, with a Militech SMG in one hand and his Malorian arms in the other, Johnny resolved to leave cover, shouting at and provoking Smasher while emptying his ammo into the Borg. Smasher, surprised at Silverhand's audacity, paused for one moment, and then whipped around and fired his auto shotgun at Silverhand, ripping the rocker boy in half. Silverhand fell to the ground with a surprised look on his face, his Malorian still smoking. It only took a second, but this stalled enough time for Shaitan to emerge from camouflage behind Smasher and immobilize him, granting the rest of the team the chance to escape. Spider-Murphy tried to reach to the barely alive Johnny, but she was stopped by Rogue, who told her he was gone. Spider, knowing she couldn't extract him, reached inside her jacket to pull out a data slug Alt had given to her long ago, and as she whispered to Johnny that she was sorry, she inserted the chip into the back of the dying rocker boy's skull. She then reached for her data suitcase, quickly realizing it had been destroyed in the crossfire, and then escaped with Rogue, knowing that both Johnny and Raish Bartmoss would one day be avenged. Johnny's engram on the relic in 2077 holds a different tale of the events. In Johnny's version, he escaped the initial fight with Smasher and attempted to reach the helicopter where Rogue was waiting, but was again cut off by Smasher. Johnny was then presumed gunned down by the Borg and dead, but was instead recovered and detained by Arasaka. According to the engram, while in the custody of Arasaka, Johnny was interrogated first by the Corp security and then later by Saburo Arasaka himself with the assistance of a techie. He was subjected to the Soulkiller program, in which his consciousness was scanned and stored on an engram as his physical body died. He was then allegedly buried under concrete in the oil fields just outside of Night City. Despite there being no body to intern, a niche was dedicated to Johnny's memory at the North Oak Columbarium. His epitaph, which uses his real name, reads, "Robert John Linder, son of a bitch who never gave up, a legend among legends." So why were these events so distorted in Silverhand's memory? Well, Chum, you'll need some more explanation before we get to that. Sorry. Not long after the 2023 AHQ incident, firefighter and Johnny Silverhand fan, Samantha Stevens, accessed the hot zone after receiving a request from her close friend, Angel. There, Samantha recovered a non-detonated mini-nuke from a wrecked bunker of the destroyed towers, one that was owned by the Arasaka Corporation. She later tossed its contents in a Del Coronado Bay. After finding Johnny's body among the ruins, she placed it into the nuke crate to preserve it. At some point, Samantha also recovered several of Johnny's possessions, including one of his Malorian arms and his Porsche. Along with the bomb case, she hid these items in her garage somewhere in Night City, where she protected and took care of them for years. There's actually an entire story about this that was meant to be in Aftershocks, the unreleased third book of the Firestorm series for Cyberpunk 2020. The reasoning behind why it wasn't was actually stated by Mike. There is an entire short story I wrote that happens at Ground Zero that day, and how Samantha ended up with Johnny's body. I was planning to put it in Aftershocks the day I finished the story. In fact, about 20 minutes after, somebody flew a plane into the last of the Twin Towers, and suddenly, it was no longer appropriate to release it in the face of so much real-world death." End quote. This is also the probable reason as to why the dual 2020 Arasaka Towers were retconned in favor of a singular tower. During the time of Red, after encountering a group of Edgerunners who were trying to find an unreleased song by Silverhand, Samantha tasked the group with transporting the crate containing Johnny's body to Los Alamos Labs in New Mexico. Before they left, Samantha took one of them, a mercenary known as Zara, aside and gifted her the Malorian. She told Zara that the owner was never going to use it again, adding that Zara seemed the right person to carry it for him. The group of Edgerunners, after several encounters along the journey, even one with Michiko Arasaka that was much friendlier than expected, managed to deliver the crate to Angel in New Mexico, a woman who bared a shocking resemblance to the Alt Cunningham. After explaining its importance, giving thanks, and of course, a copy of the promised unreleased song titled Black Dog, the Edgerunners left, leaving Angel alone with the new crate. After opening it up and revealing the cold, preserved body, she whispered, "Hello, my love." Between this delivery in 2045 and the year of 2077, we can only really speculate at the moment, seeing as there's been no adventures or stories to follow it all up. But we can assume, based on what we know, that Atom Smasher and, in turn, Arasaka had managed to track down Johnny Silverhand's belongings as well as his engram, apparently leaving Adam in charge of his body and possessions. During this era, Hanako Arasaka, a highly skilled netrunner, had taken interest in the work of Alt Cunningham, being one of the few to exist to actually grasp the true meaning of her work. Having always been reclusive, she preferred to work on her digital projects, particularly on a revised version of Soul Killer, with the aim of transferring engrams into clone bodies. This would end up laying the foundation for Sabro's personal commission, the Relic. At some point prior to 2077, Johnny Silverhand's engram was copied onto a prototype version of the Relic, known as Relic 2.0. This device was then stolen by Yorinobu Arasaka, and stored within a secure vault in Konpeki Plaza in an attempt by Yorinobu to bait his father, Saburo, out into the public. The engram and its location were uncovered by the Voodoo Boys, who then planned to steal it and use it to establish contact with Alt Cunningham and pass through the Black Wall. The Voodoo Boys hired Evelyn Parker to record a braindance of the room and determine its security measures as well as the location of the relic. Evelyn instead decided to betray the Voodoo Boys and steal the device for herself to sell to Netwatch. Using fixer Dexter Deshawn, she hired mercenaries V and Jackie Wells to steal the relic from Yorinobu's room. During this mission, the two mercenaries were nearly successful in stealing the relic without getting caught, but their heist quickly fell apart after the unexpected murder of Saburo by his son. During the mercenaries' improvised escape, the relic storage case was damaged. To ensure the relic's preservation, a wounded Jackie inserted it into a shard slot, then later placed it into V's hands as he lied dying of his wounds in the Delamain cab. Immediately after Jackie's death outside of a no-tell motel, V inserted the relic into their own shard slot. Because of this, the relic activated upon V's murder at the hands of Deshawn, preserving V's life and finally awakening Johnny's engram. It then began transferring the engram to V's brain, overriding the mercenary's consciousness without Johnny's digital personality, just as it was programmed to do. Initially attacking V in a bid to take over their mind and body, Johnny eventually decided to cooperate with V to ensure his own survival, or at least ensure the relic's retrieval from V's head. Johnny appeared to V on numerous occasions, often either to provide advice to V or to offer his thoughts on respective situations. Johnny also attempted to take control of V's body on a handful of occasions, and the relic itself placed V into glimpses of Johnny's memories, including his attempt to save Alt in 2013 and his final attack on the Arasaka Towers in 2023. The fate of the engrammatic Silverhand comes down to the choices made at the end of a game. The devil ending will result in the relic being removed and V left only a husk of their former self, leaving V to become an engram or reject Arasaka's offer and return to Earth to die. The tower is somewhat of a parallel to the devil, being that V sides with the Corp Militech and has Silverhand ripped from their mind, though this time V lives on without Cyberware or Johnny, left to begin life anew. The rest of the endings are ultimately narrowed down to one of the two outcomes. Johnny Silverhand takes over the body of V and lives on in the year of 2077, choosing to leave Night City feeling grateful to live again, but also sad over V's fate. Or Johnny Silverhand follows Alt Cunningham beyond the Black Wall to be with the rest of the AI, similar to himself. And that is obviously where the story of Silverhand ends, at least when it comes to lore exposition. But there's something I've been edge running you all about. Why do the memories of Silverhand as experienced in 2077 not align with those presented in the tabletop RPGs? Well, there are several reasons behind this, some backed by the creators and some backed by in-game context. And of course, after this, we will be returning to just why a woman so similar to Alt Cunningham was retrieving the preserved body of Johnny Silverhand, who, keep in mind, still had that chip, presumably containing his engram, inserted by Spider Murphy. So to kick it off, we have some reasoning provided by the creator of the TTRPGs, Mike Pondsmith. He states on his Reddit account, Johnny's recollection of the events that day are scrambled from the rad damage his body took, and the process of recording his engram. CDPR and I have both agreed that Johnny is an unreliable narrator at best." End quote. So radiation damage happens to be one of the reasons listed as to why these memories are inaccurate. It is implied though that there's other reasoning behind it that both CD Projekt Red and Mike himself had come up with. So let's dig a bit deeper here. The first of which being the unreliable narrator perspective. Why exactly would Silverhand himself have fabricated these details? Well, we actually have Alt Cunningham to answer this in 2077.
Your death wasn't Johnny's fault.
How could you know?
Seen you in his memories. It was an accident.
What you saw was his subjective view of what happened. A warped account of events he locked away in his subconscious and replayed time and again. It bears no resemblance to the truth.
Silverhand has been trapped in Soul Prison for well over 50 years by the point of 2077, truly with nothing but his own thoughts. Better yet, his engram is designed to be more human despite its AI nature. Then alongside the damage it's incurred, it makes sense that Silverhand wouldn't be able to recall these events vividly. There would be gaps to fill in and data loss as time went on, meaning that Silverhand isn't necessarily actually lying to us, he genuinely believes what he is saying. The best example of this phenomena is during his 2023 memories. When he initially encounters Smasher, it plays out somewhat similarly to the tabletops. A huge explosion, Adam Smasher with Arasaka troops, but this time, he's all alone. There's no one near him to save. There's no reason for him to die here. It's excluding information to make sense of it all, which all the more leads up to a sudden cut when you think he might die. A cut from an inescapable moment that finds him on the rooftop, back with his crewmates. A last-ditch effort to survive, but this time, when he slips and falls, it ultimately allows his crew to escape the clutches of Adam Smasher. In reality, the legend to fight Smasher on the top of Arasaka Towers was Morgan Blackhand, Militech's top solo. This is where his memories just might branch off to something more than just attempting to fill in the blanks. So there's two ways to look at this. The engram is trying to make sense of just how it could have been created, without the knowledge of Spider Murphy being in possession of the Soul Killer program. The next assumption would be that Arasaka nabbed up Silverhand and ultimately soul killed him. This next idea though implies that this change wasn't produced by the fault of the engram, rather it was tampered with. So either Angel, who came into possession of the chip, altered the memories to protect Spider Murphy, or Arasaka, who eventually took possession, altered the chip to create a false interrogation scene, one in which the engram would believe everything happening was real, rather than just being in Soul Prison. And I'm going to quickly list a couple of other inconsistencies for completion's sake, the most commonly mentioned in my comments being Rogue's quote right before the raid on Arasaka Tower.
Not this time, honey!
In many people's minds, this quote would imply that Rogue had at some point let Silverhand slip out of a helicopter. The implication being that in his 2023 flashback, Rogue is unable to bring Silverhand up into the heli before Smasher arrives.
Murphy?
Door's sealed, but it won't hold for long. Run, Johnny. Like the wind.
though we know this couldn't be a true event. So how do we explain it? Well, keep in mind that Rogue is the one to tell Murphy that they need to leave Silverhand behind while he lay there dying. She likely feels responsibility for his death, and in that case, it just makes sense that she would view it as letting him go, which would parallel this quote pretty well. Of course, the two have a long history together as well, so this really could have happened at some other point, or it's just an oversight by the developers. There's one more note I'd like to mention on this topic. Take notice that besides Johnny, the relic is very capable of altering your reality. For example, Johnny himself moving objects around. Would it really be so surprising that while in Johnny's view, we get an unreliable perspective? Another inconsistency is the Ingrams' claim that Johnny participated in the Second Central American War in Mexico, while in reality, he was sent to Nicaragua. Then, there's the Ingram stating that his dog tags originally belonged to a soldier who sacrificed his life to save Johnny during the war. Despite this, the tags have Johnny's original name, not that of his brother-in-arms. Obviously, this could spark some doubt in what Silverhand's true name is, but because of the tabletop RPGs and even the 2013 flashback, we know his name is truly Robert John Linder. So in all likelihood, Silverhand just considers himself a separate person from who he once was, that thanks to his time in the military, he opened his eyes to the corruption surrounding him. So we now understand the reasoning behind Silverhand's false memories, for the most part. But what you don't understand is the story behind Angel and the preservation of Johnny Silverhand's body. Well, canonically, there's really not much to say, but we can definitely make some connections and inferences using a separate timeline from the main series, the Cyber Generation Sourcebook. This timeline was a sort of superhero spin on the series, focusing more on the idea of saving the world rather than saving yourself. The story centered around teenagers with unusual superhuman skills gained from a nanotech virus called the Carbon Plague, which still appears in canon but is quickly contained, which is a good starting point as a large portion of this book is recycled into canon in some way, shape, or form. Many of the details now considered canon were actually established in Cyber Generation, since it seems to primarily branch off at the outbreak of the Carbon Plague. So characters who had their backgrounds established in this book, such as Ra's Bartmoss or Morgan Blackhand, remain for the most part canon. Just like many other Night City legends, we can also find the stories of Johnny Silverhand and Alt Cunningham that seem to connect just a bit too well to the Black Dog storyline. Take for example, Alt Cunningham's. Alt Cunningham had been doomed to life as an AI after Johnny Silverhand unplugged her in his rescue attempt, with Silverhand depositing her now mindless husk safely into cold sleep. Of course, not changing anything from previous canon. While we never officially learn of what Silverhand did with her body that held a faint pulse, we could assume he wouldn't just give up and dispose of it. Back to Cyber Generation, Alt went on to steal $20 million from the Arasaka mainframe to plan an escape. Using these newly acquired funds, she set up a small, highly secret research corp through her now huge web of investment accounts. Over these 9 years, she directed her employees to study the most advanced techniques in cloning technologies, including stolen data on Biotechnica's failed cloning attempts in 2019, with an eye towards replicating her frozen body, which is all tried and true tech in current canon. By 2019, Alt had reversed the Soulkiller process with a new program. She instructed her employees to bring a cloned body to the lab and prepared the downloading process. But obviously, this being cyberpunk and all, it hadn't gone so smoothly. Instead of her AI conscious being transferred, she had actually transferred her basic personality into a clone. She had learned it was only possible to copy her neural net into the waiting brain. The original remained trapped in the net. Hopeless of her return to reality, she went on to create Shangri-La for the hundreds of Soulkiller victims and other disembodied personalities transferred into the net. This would be known as the Ghost Town, the very same concept we learned about in Cyberpunk Red and 2077. And here comes Johnny Silverhand, a rocker boy who rather than fall victim to Atom Smasher during a raid on Arasaka, falls victim to a Biotechnica-sponsored assassination, only to end up met with an offer by Alt Cunningham's clone while trapped in a Cairo tank with half his body gone. This was the offer: to upload his engram to the net via Soulkiller and download him into a suitable body. But there is a secret up Alt's sleeve. This wouldn't be the original Johnny. It was an unaware copy sent out to Rome while the original was data stored for safekeeping. That way, if he ever ended up being killed yet again, Alt 2 would be capable of farming copies of his engram and body to make more and more. Now take all of this information and plug it into the canon timeline. Everything suddenly makes sense. We understand how Angel can exist and have the resources to get Silverhand's body, not to mention having an unreleased samurai song and laboratory at her disposal. Then, we also can now review just how Angel could get her hands on the engram and body. Yet the Silverhand relic can claim he was in soul prison for 50 years. The original version of the engram was never awakened. She only ever copied it in order to preserve the previous. And maybe there's a thought, a theory, starting to peek out into your brain. What happened between Angel getting the body and engram and Arasaka obtaining it? Well, it's more than likely that at some point, a new Silverhand was walking around the Earth with Angel. Now, whether they were killed when Atom Smasher tracked down Silverhand's possessions, engram, and body, or even still alive to the year of 2077, is a whole other debate. And keep in mind after all of this information that the tabletop RPGs are canon to 2077. So really, it's not about if it happened, but instead how it all connects. The details left unmentioned between these informative adventures, the details left for us to figure out as a community, as well as forming our very own adventures around them.
Do you know what happens when someone in Havana lights a cigar?
Somewhere in the world, Aguilar takes a life.
So they say.
Underneath the neon and technological disguise of Cyberpunk 2077, crime and corruption runs rampant. This cruel environment is unfortunately not bound to the confines of Night City. Suffering is widespread no matter the country you step in, the only place of refuge essentially being the Crystal Palace, a location in space for the ultra-wealthy. So it should come as no surprise that one of the most popular occupations happens to be that of mercenary work. Mercs typically work with fixers, a go-between who slap together a team of pros with the right skills for the client. Fixers will take care of all the messy intricacies of dirty biz. You won't even have to meet the merc doing it for you, if that's what you want. The job will get done quickly and discreetly, for the right price of course. Most mercs start out on the street, taking whatever comes their way until they can catch a fixer's attention. Only a few of them end up like Morgan Blackhand or Andrew Boa Boa Wayland. This is to say, legends. A classification of mercs that stand out from the rest, for not only their experience, but achievements. The very name of a legend alone demands respect and invokes a sense of fear. The most popularized through Morgan Blackhand being that of solos, mercenaries who specialize in combat skills, whether on the battlefield or as hired muscle. In the recent Phantom Liberty expansion, we were introduced to one such legend that captured the attention of many. There's a catch with this legend though. They are not unique to Night City, and we never even meet them. Yet their reputation alone tells us everything we need to know. Aguilar Nubiola. The codename of this assassin for hire, who works for the Cuban cartel, has become synonymous with bad news. It is said that every time someone in Havana lights a cigar, Aguilar extinguishes a life somewhere around the globe, all to secure the interest of their employers. In the criminal underworld, they have developed the reputation of the ultimate assassin, ruthless, incorruptible, and brutally efficient. Sometimes they act as a negotiator, where even their mere presence can cool heated disputes. Should the one-person diplomatic routine fail, bodies will begin to drop, as many as necessary. Their legend has grown to the point that some Valentinos scare their misbehaving children with the warning, if you don't quiet yourself, Aguilar will. Even if you only believe a fraction of the urban legends tied to them, the infamous assassin would still have dozens of high-profile victims to their name. Whether you're a gang leader, police commissioner, corp exec, or politician, when you hear the name Aguilar, you run, you hide, and you pray for mercy. We come to learn of his legend thanks to a gig provided by Mr. Hands after the main Phantom Liberty story. So spoilers ahead if you haven't finished the expansion. Mr. Hands gives V a briefing on the situation. He wishes to select a successor to take over Dogtown that will personally benefit him. The second-hand man to Hansen, Chester Bennett. He then makes it clear that this mission won't be done by good old V, but rather V disguised as Aguilar, a merc assassin from Havana, a living legend, using an imprint and replicas of Aguilar's gun and suit to pull it off convincingly. You're likely starting to wonder at this point why I keep using gender-neutral pronouns in reference to Aguilar. That is, if you only played the gig through once. This is because Aguilar's own gender is tied with that of yours. If you're a male V, you're a male Aguilar. If you're a female V, you're a female Aguilar. So, what could this mean for Aguilar as a character? Well, it really seems to come down to a couple different concepts. The first being it could just be an impactful choice that's meant to draw some parallels between V and Aguilar. So the player feels like their story correlates with theirs on a more personal level. So whatever gender you are is the canon gender for Aguilar in said timeline. I find the other implications much more interesting. Its obvious gender isn't necessarily a prerequisite for the imprint technology, seeing as Alex can disguise as Almeric in the event that you're a female V in disguise as his sister. So, Mr. Hands definitely did not have to swap up the imprint specifically for V. It actually seems to me that the characters we encounter as Aguilar have never actually met them, and in all likelihood, wouldn't even know their gender, only the rumored appearance that even Mr. Hands can get replicas of, the suit, gun, and basic facial features to identify them, such as the cybernetic eyes and gold facial cyberware. It's obvious by Iago's reaction that he's never laid eyes on Aguilar, and while it might feel a bit less obvious, even Bennett's reaction doesn't necessarily say much besides he knows the key identifiers to look for and is aware of Barghest's connection to Aguilar, so of course he could connect the dots to learn them in this scenario. Nothing truly implies that they've met face to face before. So, this is how I look at it. Aguilar could just be an assassin for the Cuban cartel with an unknown identity, but rumors and urban legends, strong enough to make them recognizable by name and style alone. Or, Aguilar is more of a concept, a shared name and disguise among different solos of the Cuban cartel, or in this case, people like V borrowing their appearance. A name with meaning beyond a single person, a legend that could be across the world all at once. The rest of the questline is rather self-explanatory. You can find out that Bennett has contacts in Arasaka attempting to take over their smuggling routes. Then you arrive to the final destination, the memorial service for Hansen. Here, there are several different outcomes. Iago can either become the leader, die, or continue living while Bennett is in leadership, and Bennett can also die or continue living with Iago in leadership. Everything wraps up shortly after this decision. The only catch afterwards being that you get an alleged text from Aguilar, saying perhaps one day we will meet and learn just how well an imitation can rival the original, if at all. How amusing that would be. Nothing ends up coming of this though. So, here's the question I'm sure many of you chooms have. Does Aguilar ever appear in the tabletop RPGs? Well, from what I've personally found, no. I dug through Cyberpunk Red, Cyberpunk 2020 sourcebooks, and more, none of which really even mention much of Cuba or the cartel within it. So what we do know is very little. The Caribbean has been swelling with criminal organizations long before the 2000s, and had an alarming amount of both legal and illegal immigration into Miami leading up to the collapse. A lot of these immigrants happened to be connected with the various criminal organizations of their home countries before coming to America. Eventually, one of the 7 largest nomad groups in North America would form from the mass immigration from the Caribbean and South America, the Blood Nation. It's important to note as well that by the time of 2062, climate change wiped Cuba's neighbor, Haiti, off the face of the earth. So I'm sure things aren't looking pretty for Cuba. While there's plenty to say on the formation of the Blood Nation and even Central America, that's about where any info on Cuba, its cartel, and most importantly, Aguilar, ends. The group of Arasaka mercenaries had finally reached their target location. Fighting through a 7-story Connacht filled with lethal devices and robots had already reduced it to the hallways of hell. A hallway of hell that, oddly enough, had the body of Marge Simpson lying in it, covered with fresh-baked pie. Yeah, long story. One complicated even further by the horde of corporate zombies that rushed past the room the moment they entered. The room was exactly what you would expect of a highly wanted netrunner. The guy was holed up in a cramped space, one packed with gear, a generator, wires and cabling everywhere, a few personal robots scurrying around, and no furniture in the normal sense of the word. Before even taking in the surroundings to its fullest extent, several automated weapon systems begin lining up. The mercenaries open fire, stray bullets ricocheting across the room, grazing each combatant and dispatching the defenses, all the while making a mess of what was already a difficult to navigate room. The moment all the defenses were cleared, they got to work. There wasn't a moment to spare in their schedule. The netrunner had to be found, and quick. With the help of the group techie, everything was narrowed down to a single fridge. Readying their weapons, the group opened the door. The interior was not separated into normal refrigerator and freezer segments. Rather, it was one compartment full of ice and wires, with a body lying within. The mercenaries hesitated to shoot. Not because their orders were unclear by any means. It was fear. Fear of the inhumanely wide grin on their target's face. One of not only pain, but pleasure. It was this moment of hesitation that allowed their objective to be completed on its own. The iced body, still curled in a fetal position, slid out of the fridge onto the floor, completely devoid of life, yet maintaining that rictus grin. Suddenly, a set of red flags whip up next to the fridge and start waving maniacally. An old-fashioned bell by the door starts ringing loudly, and a red light flashes over a printer that's next to the bell. The printer spits out 3 pieces of paper as strains of Beethoven's Ode to Joy starts booming from the stereos throughout the Connacht. All the firing suddenly stops as confetti explodes from the ventilation ducts, and a small arachnoid robot drops from the ceiling, clutching a high-density data chip in its limbs. It says, "Have a cookie. You have 30 seconds before the grand finale." It was a warning to escape with their lives. A rare gesture in Night City, and an even creepier one from the legend Ra's Bartmoss himself. In the year of 2077, the use of computer technology has become truly universal. Regular Janes and Joes know how to use these systems to access info, communicate, and even fight. But there are others who can use the same tech to work wonders. Netrunners. A netrunner knows the ins and outs of computer systems, the programming languages, and even write or mod a killer virus. Deck in hand, they're just as dangerous as a corporate soldier armed to the teeth. While netrunners were once considered the rulers of cyberspace, using their skulljacks to roam a vast, global net and special suits to cool themselves, the landscape has changed to something unrecognizable. The era ended with the cataclysm known as the Data Crash, an event entirely orchestrated by the greatest netrunner of all time, Ra's Bartmoss. A genius plagued by what most would claim is schizophrenia. The guy was always talking about aliens, conspiracies, and the gateway to hell in the net. If they made a show about him, it would basically be Mr. Robot. Bartmoss was already a living legend of the early 2020s, but the data crash cemented him further into the history of not only Night City, but the world. When the virus was released, it infected 78.2% of the net in a matter of months. Net traffic came to a grinding halt. Corporations lost billions as the stock market destabilized, and countless military-grade AI were unshackled and mutated into extremely dangerous entities. He had single-handedly made the net a hellscape that was near impossible to navigate until the later 2040s, in which Netwatch put up the Black Wall. So, just who is Ra's Bartmoss? Where did he come from, and how did he manage to single-handedly perform the world-altering data crash? Today, we will be decrypting the story and truth behind Night City's most talented netrunner. This is the legend of Ra's Bartmoss. Ra's was born in the year 1992, and it wouldn't be long before he kicked off his netrunning career. You might expect a genius to start around the age of 9 like Spider Murphy did, but you might want to deplete yourself of any and all expectations. They will only hurt you in the long run while we're talking about Bartmoss. He began netrunning at the age of 4 years old. At such a young age, most would still be talking to their imaginary friends. Well, he probably was. Not because he was 4, but because he did it in adulthood as well. But because he was so inexperienced, he made the mistake of using his real name, not knowing the risks. But by the time he realized it was a stupid move, or any consequences could have followed, it was already good enough that it didn't matter. It was like Bartmoss had a sixth sense for netrunning. In his early teen years, Bartmoss even tried to go legit in writing software. He worked with some of the best companies, always using his real name. The companies really did this under the assumption that he wouldn't run against their own systems. Ra's had always promised with a full intent not to double-cross his employers or go snooping around their closets. Yet, his promise only ever lasted about 2 weeks. It would become glaringly obvious that serious breaches of security would occur wherever he worked about 1 month after he signed on. Another 2 months, and the Corp would finally figure out he was imploding their systems in the name of justice, and he'd have to disappear. He always knew when he'd been found out, and made a grand escape in good time. To set a specific example, he once worked for a year at a smaller firm, CCI Development. For what it's worth, they didn't even have any skeletons in the closet. So things worked fine, and the company came out with some innovative new products, including the Demon series and a powerful new database system. Unfortunately for this small firm, Bartmoss was never the type to sit still and be a lapdog. He required some spontaneous excitement to keep his heart beating. So, he dropped a few surprises into the database code, including a full-blown quote-unquote political movie. When word got back to the company, they made a big mistake in their response. They fired Bartmoss. There's a cardinal corporate rule that can't be broken in the industry. Never fire someone who knows your system and has the talent to use that knowledge. Kill them instead. Within a week, their entire computer system had fried its own brains, and the company went belly up. Bartmoss took this opportunity to sell the source code to the Demon programs to several software houses simultaneously, and had enough money that he would never have to work again. Of course, each publisher thought they were getting exclusive rights, so they all ended up wanting his scalp. They just didn't understand that Ra's didn't believe in exclusive rights. When Bartmoss turned 17, he had been running the net for 13 years and had a full set of high-quality trodes and a library of software that the likes of which no one else had ever seen. It was around this time that a young Spider Murphy would track down Bartmoss, all to warn him that her corporate puppet of a father had killed his SIN, a state identification number given to every voting citizen in the US. This ID encoded a person's criminal attacks history, as well as their DNA pattern, all of which is duplicated in state government mainframes. If your SIN is deleted, you can't legally get a job, you can't vote, and your rights are pretty much hash. Not that all of this really mattered much for a skilled cyberspace criminal like Bartmoss. It was because of this chance encounter and Murphy's unique netrunning skills at her young age that the two would become extremely close friends. Throughout the years, she got training from Bartmoss, and the two experimented with everything and tried every interface that they had heard of. Their shared knowledge of tech and the net was unrivaled. Ra's Bartmoss, along with Spider Murphy and a couple talented netrunners named Dog and Edger, would run the net for fun and lynch Netwatch hacks without profit, all because it was not only the right thing to do, but because they enjoyed doing the impossible. Shortly after the Pacifica region of the net was formed, Bartmoss would run the region with Alt Cunningham, both of which would come to form extremely fond memories of this region of the net and their time net running together. Alt would even admit later on that these times were her best net running memories. By the early 2010s, Bartmoss moved into a Connat building on the edge of the combat zone, where he arranged for everyone who did not have a neural implant to leave the building, and instead arranged to have corporate workers with neural processors, whereupon he installed within them a hidden subconscious personality program to control them. He would use everyone in the building for surveillance and protection, making them the perfect corporate zombies. While he was working on the project in secret, he also had another one being set up as well, one with much more devastating effects. The IG transformation algorithm was in its final steps of production, a system that would change the net as everyone knew it. Bartmoss happened to personally know the developers of this unified OS, so he used these connections to sneak his own bit of code in without raising any alarms. He had programmed several backdoors in the protocol code that would allow him to make changes that would affect any computer that ever logged into this new net, which would essentially act as a cheat code to mass target any OS from then on. One of these many backdoors he created had a dead man's switch attached to it, meaning in the event of his death, this backdoor would be automatically activated. A final act of revenge against all the corporations he despised and viewed as the ultimate oppressors of humanity. In September of 2014, when the IG protocol was released to reform the net in order to provide a uniform interface look and feel, Bartmoss stayed jacked in while the rest unplugged, all to watch the entire net redesign itself directly in front of him. There's a reason he was the only one crazy enough to remain plugged in during this process. His biomonitors showed that his heart had stopped for a complete 10 seconds while his sectors were recompiled. He hadn't even noticed this in the moment, but at the time it was all over, it seemed to not have harmed him. In 2015, Ra's Bartmoss met a woman by the name Kimi Tara on the net and took her out on a date. They slept together, which Bartmoss ended up regretting as she left him soon afterwards. She was a woman infatuated with media personalities to the point of measuring her own self-worth with her ability to seduce them. Fortunately for her, she was pretty good at it. Her problem was that as soon as she had them, she felt the need to move on to the next, which is exactly what she did to Bartmoss, and it left him pretty burnt, so bad that he became opposed to physical relationships after this event. Eventually, at some point in 2020, Bartmoss's heart stopped and his physical body died for unknown reasons, though his life support machine sensed it and super cooled his body. Because he was connected to the net at the time, he continued to live there. While this event could have been out of sheer bad luck and some huge coincidence, it wouldn't be unreasonable to assume it could be heart failure as well, a possible consequence of his bad net running habits and being plugged in during the IG protocol transformation. After his physical death, he tried to contact Spider for 10 months, sending her an email to inform her of his death and began telling her his life memories so that they could finish compiling Ra's Bartmoss's guide to the net. Around this time, Bartmoss released the Succubus 3 program and made it look like Spider's net icon as a last Big Brother sort of prank, so that she would be the lust object to hormonally challenged losers on the net. He had intentionally waited until he was dead so that Spider would not be able to take revenge, which in all technicality, he was. It's also stated that due to his hyper-cool nervous system, Ra's was forced to slowly transmit data, essentially putting him out of the net running biz and forcing him to spend his time in boredom of stasis while doing what he could to finish his guide to the net, which had become his main concern during this time. I would just like to note that in the text, we are told that Bartmoss would eventually have his system upgraded so he can run the net again, except the stated source for this upgrade is the now retconned Cyber Generation sourcebook. So while the details in there aren't considered entirely canon, we can make the assumption that Bartmoss had his cyber modem upgraded at some point in this canon timeline, an assumption we will have to stick with for the rest of the story to make sense. In 2021, during the Fourth Corporate War, Militech requested the help of Ra's Bartmoss to locate Soulkiller 2.0, While Bartmoss was initially inclined to reject this offer and attack Militech in reprisal, Alt Cunningham, as a soul-killed AI, managed to convince Bartmoss to hunt for Soulkiller. Bartmoss couldn't reject the request from a friend as close as Alt, so he contracted with Militech. Entirely electronic, of course, as to allow himself power over modifying the contract whenever he deemed necessary. Being the genius he is, it took less than a month for him to track down the Soulkiller program. Elated, he went on a net crime spree against Arasaka and several other non-involved corporations. It was during the course of one such run, his line got traced, and suddenly both Militech and Arasaka knew where he was. Both corporations immediately made moves towards the location. Arasaka, of course, sent a massive strike team to take Raish out. The solo Morgan Blackhand and Militech were desperate to save an asset of theirs and move forces to protect him, who also planned to extract him afterward, haul him off to a Militech covert ops base, and not so incidentally get themselves in a position of being able to blackmail his frozen body. This was a rushed conflict between the two largest corporations in existence over the king of all netrunners. His Connapt, in extremely short notice, became a war zone. In the end, Raish never stood a chance, no matter the security he had in place with the corporate zombies and automatic defenses. This is because Arasaka had something that couldn't be blocked, not by any means that Raish had. They dropped an orbital rock onto his Connapt, so no matter what forces got to Bartmoss first, the entire operation was completely disrupted and spelled out the death of Bartmoss. What happened as a result could be argued as a loss for Arasaka rather than a win. It was May 26. A young netrunner in her late 20s, long braided red hair, and a short stature had just jacked into the net for some programming. In the middle of his session, she was interrupted by an annoying mail alert. It blocked her vision with a fat sausage bee and a virtual voice saying, "You've got mail. Oh god, oh god, oh god, it's coming. Now, yes." The message was from her close friend and colleague netrunner, Raish Bartmoss. He knew exactly how to peeve the woman. She hated it. The message contained was simple. It read, Hawksbat 1, one of the many codes Raish and her had worked out to arrange meetings and chat rooms and the like. This particular code was unfamiliar and somewhat alarming in comparison to the rest. It had never been used before because it was the code. The Holy Mother of God, it's all happening now code. With how Raish's mind works, he hadn't even used this code when he got flatlined and confined to the stasis of the freezer unit. In response, Spider Murphy urgently rushed to this chat room, crashing in with all her icebreakers and killer utilities loaded. Demons flying point, the works. What she found was somewhat unsettling. Raish was just standing there, calm as could be. "Sweetheart, I'm so glad you could make it," he said. None of his standard psychosis even made a cameo in the timbre of his voice. Unlike the average person, being calm and perfectly normal created an eerie atmosphere around Raish. It was just too outside the norm. It was like he was suddenly Mrs. Claus or something. "Have I ever told you how much I love you? Come on, they just loaded this romantic little VR at the dunes. Let's go, just the two of us." "Okay," Spider responded nervously. Just hearing him talk like that tone, those words, soul chilling. The two went somewhere in Asia, an undisclosed location, in the middle of net nowhere. Suddenly an icon appeared, a simple matte black ball. "Every year I come here, and every year I reset this." Then he looked at Spider, right in the eyes. She thought she could see a swelling of tears. "But I'm through, Arabella." A wry smile. "My cookie is goosed, I suppose I'd say. I didn't want to do this alone. Someone has to see it. I want you to be here." He paused, took a breath. "Well, here it goes." He looked at the ball. He waved his hand. A ping, and it changed to a globe. He shook his head. A whistle, and it's changed to a switch. And it squeaked into a big red button. No, that's not it either. Then there followed this flurry of noises and icons flashing by, an almost cartoon stream of images. A car, a bomb, a kid, a wallaby, a cream pie. It all went on, accompanied by a cacophony of grunts, hops, barks, you name it. This went on for 30 seconds. "Oh, frag it all," he said finally. Covering his eyes, he thrust his forefinger at the shifting icon. As it hit, the icon froze. His finger ended up sticking in the nostril of a clown's head. As it pushed in, there was a squawk. He turned and smiled, half relief, half psychosis. He pulled his finger from the happy clown's nose and whimpered. This was at least moderately familiar turf when it comes to Raish. "What have you done?" Spider inquired. Her deck began to crash as he answered, jamming the IG transform signal and trashing her tracer routine. "What have I done? Just wait, Spidey," he said with a demonic smile. "Wait, and you'll see. You'll see, you'll see, you'll see, you'll see, you'll see." The communication ended, and with it, the net as everyone knew it. Bartmoss had created the Rabbids as a grand act of defiance against corporate control to be triggered in the event of his death. It was designed to breach all corporate data fortresses and unleash their data onto the net for all to access. In classic Bartmoss fashion, the Rabbids virus were modeled after Bartmoss himself and were capable of replicating in high speeds, meaning that they would roam in massive hordes in the thousands range. When the virus was released, it initially did what it was supposed to, targeting known Bartmoss enemies such as Arasaka and releasing all their information to the public. With Bartmoss gone and unable to monitor their actions, the viruses began to exceed their original programming parameters and began to wreak havoc across the net. No longer discriminating between its targets, it infected 78.2% of the net in a matter of months. Net traffic came to a grinding halt, corporations lost billions as the stock market destabilized, huge amounts of data was corrupted, and countless military-grade AI were unshackled and mutated into extremely dangerous entities. The virus and programs affected by it had become so powerful that Netwatch was unable to destroy them, rendering the net unusable. This would only change in the 2040s when Netwatch put up the Black Wall with the help of Alt Cunningham and other AI, finally opening up the IG protocol net back to the public. This of course spelled out the end of the road for Bartmoss. He was officially dead and had been put to rest. Or was he? A body was never actually recovered from his destroyed Conapt. Even weirder is what information we can find once the 2070s roll around. During the Cold Mirage questline, V will find Raish Bartmoss's fridge and body out in the Badlands, untouched and unbothered. Certainly not looking like it had been lit up by gunfire, tampered with, blown up, or smashed by an orbital projectile. V can take his cyberdeck to the Netrunner Nyx at the Afterlife for analysis, in which all that is found is some mildly interesting chat logs. To further his confusion, we can find a shard that details his freezer contract. It states that this 50-year contract would expire on April 2nd of 2075, and the contents would be discarded at the landfill at the requested location on April 10th, 2075. Keep in mind that Bartmoss's death took place 4 years ahead of this apparent contract forming, so just how in the hell was his body and freezer under contract and in a location that this company could access despite all the information we've been provided? This could mean several things that we honestly just don't have the answer to. This could be a decoy body that was in place, his original body could have been recovered and preserved by Spider Murphy, or he just never died in the first place. Which seems the least likely answer out of them all, though I wouldn't turn your back on it just yet. There's certainly been plenty of reports of people living in the net despite their body dying, or those who have been soul killed who now live in the ghost town created by Alt Cunningham. If you ever listen to Moro Rock, there's still some urban legends and conspiracies floating around about Bartmoss's apparent survival, about him even being the Zen master.
So people, listen up, I've got a story to share with you. Recently, I've been hearing about this monk that's been walking around nice city streets, healing the sick, but only those he deems worthy. Some of my listeners seem convinced that it's none other than Raish Bartmoss. Raish Bartmoss. Yeah, you know, the guy, the chief architect of the net, and later its badass destroyer. The rumor has always been he got taken out by a kill sat in the early days of the Fourth Corporate, but no one ever took responsibility for that strike. Is it possible Bart Moss set his creations wild and faked his own death? Did he bring down the net he created because it had turned into another tool the corporations could use to track us and ultimately completely subjugate us? Think about it.
Though none of these can be confirmed at this moment in time, they leave you with something to think about. You can even trigger a dialogue with Songbird and Phantom Liberty about finding Bart Moss's body, to which she has no response.
Biotechnica in 63 or 4. Fermentation facility in Oregon. Off the grid hack. Sound familiar?
No shit, Biotechnica. Enough to make even Bart Moss blush.
That paranoid clown? Please. Sure hope I don't wind up packed in a fridge standing... who knows where.
I happen to know where. Garbage dump in the Badlands.
And this, Chooms, has been the decryption of the story behind the world's greatest netrunner and mastermind behind the data crash, Ra's Bart Moss. If you managed to make it this far into the video, I just want to give a huge thanks for the support. I appreciate you taking your time out of your busy days to give me a listen, more so than I could ever put into words. This of course includes my channel members who continue to support me even during times in which I can't upload as much as I like. I'm glad I got to put this video together, as there's many stories I wanted to tell you all, but many just didn't fit into a full-length video. Soon enough, I'll be doing the same for corporations. As always, make sure to have a great week, Chooms, and I will see you in the next one.